Trustee Bertelson? Here. Trustee Black?
Here.
Trustee D?
Here.
Trustee Lucine?
Here.
Trustee Moran?
Here.
Trustee Neal?
Here.
Trustee Reinhardt?
Here.
Trustee Wilson?
For those who are able to stand and have not recently had a hip replacement, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. On agenda and non-agenda items. During public comment, no member of the public will be allowed to comment on contested cases, other adjudicative proceedings, or personnel matters. The public portions of this board meeting are being recorded in accordance with District Policy 1420 and Section 2-3-214 MCA. By remaining in this meeting, all participants and attendees acknowledge they may appear on the recording, which will be placed on the school district's website for a minimum of 1 year from today. Further instructions about participating will be provided throughout the meeting. Before we engage in the business of the board, I would like to share with all the core purpose of the Bozeman School District, which can be found on the back of our nameplates. It reads, Bozeman Public Schools exists to ensure high-level learning for all students. Before we move into our agenda, we have guests in the room tonight. The 2024 Fulbright Teaching Excellence and Achievement Program. Montana State University's Office of International Programs is partnering with the Bozeman Public Schools to welcome 23 teachers from 19 different countries on the Fulbright Teaching Excellence and Achievement Program. This program is funded by the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs of the U.S. Department of State and facilitated by International Research and Exchange Board in Washington, D.C. The program provides secondary school teachers from around the world with opportunities to develop expertise in their subject areas, enhance their teaching skills, and increase knowledge about the United States. TEA fellows are here in the United States to participate in a 6-week professional development program at Montana State University, which is one of 5 universities hosting the program this fall. The Fulbright Teaching Excellence and Achievement Program is a 6-week professional development program for full-time international secondary school teachers that provides professional development to enhance teachers' expertise in their teaching disciplines and equip them with new and best practices in teaching methodology, curriculum development, and instructional technology. The program contributes to improving secondary education in participating countries by preparing program participants to serve as teacher leaders and to have them share experiences and skills with their colleagues and students upon returning home. The 23 international teachers are currently partnered with Bozeman Public Schools teachers at Bozeman High School and Gallatin High School for a 40-hour field experience. The overall program dates are September 11th through October 28th, and we are thrilled to welcome them to our district. I will ask for TEA fellow spokesperson to say a few words and ask each of our esteemed visitors to stand and introduce themselves. Welcome. Please come forward and have a seat at this table right here if you would like to. And we have a microphone. Yes, please. And you can touch the button on the right and it'll light up green and we'll all hear you.
Is this fine? Okay. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Safa Abu Aita. I'm from Bethlehem, Palestine. I'm so blessed to be born in the town where Jesus Christ was born. So as you said, the Fulbright Teacher Program, TEA, Teaching Excellence and Achievement, gives us the opportunity to come to the United States for several states. And we are very lucky to be here in Bozeman. And most of us are English teachers. One is French teacher. And we are looking forward for the experience in the Gallatin School and the Bozeman School. We hope to learn more about the American educational system and also about new teaching methodologies and the culture, because the culture here is very different, and we'd like to exchange our culture also, to learn about yours and teach you about ours. And most importantly, we want to take all what we learn here and take them back home with us. And we try all the best, our best to apply what we learned here in our schools, because our schools are not like much fortunate as yours. So thank you so much for having us. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would each of our visitors like to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from? Starting, sure. Thank you very much, and welcome, and thank you for coming to our meeting tonight. Are there any trustee questions? Thanks again for coming. You're welcome to stay as long as you would like to. We will now move into agenda item 2.2, Board Education. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for coming.
Well, good afternoon. It's truly an honor to be back here. Just for introductions, my name is Douglas Fisher. I'm a former trustee and now I serve on the City Commission. With me is Police Chief Jim Velkamp from Bozeman Police, and then Battalion Chief James Short from Bozeman Fire. We are here, and first of all, if I may take just a quick minute, I really, guys, want to thank you very much for this little pocket watch you gave me after my service. It goes with me in many places. It often shares a pocket with the values exercise that Rob Watson walked us through as a board, and that I saved from my dog many years ago. And it's a great reminder of the experiences that I've had on this board and the great work that this board and this district has done. And so really an honor. But this is a full agenda. We are going to try and keep this to 15 minutes. We may be the first ones to do so if we do so. But we're here to talk about our first responder and Fire Station 4 levy and bond issue that the Bozeman City Commission has put on the ballot for Bozeman voters to decide on. This is an education effort. We're here to talk about, as you can see, how Bozeman's growth has impacted our public safety departments, how this bond kind of addresses those issues that we are seeing as that growth continues, and why we are asking for this now. And then what exactly you're going to see on your ballot. You guys are no strangers to the levy versus bond issue, but many voters, it's still a question. And then, of course, we're happy to take questions. Now, to paraphrase Mike Waterman, trustees, at these sort of hearings, trustees and city commissioners are usually supposed to be eye candy. You're going to be sorely disappointed today, but I do want to give this to our experts here who will take this forward and talk about that history and why we need this.
Good evening, board members, and thank you, Commissioner Fisher, for the introduction. My name is James Short, Battalion Chief with Bozeman Fire. Can everyone hear me okay? Well, fantastic. Thank you for the opportunity to present this evening. So we've got a few slides to go over with you from both myself and Chief Veldkamp, and then we do have time for questions near the end here, if you so choose to ask some as the follow-up. So the last time a fire station was added to the city of Bozeman was in 2007 when it was approved by the voters, and then in 2009 when it actually opened and we increased our service delivery to the community. So 2007, the voters passed the levy. The station takes a couple of years to be built, and in 2009, we actually opened that station. I was one of the hires that was so fortunate to be hired to staff that station. So it's been a little while since that station has been open, and we've increased our service footprint for the community of Bozeman. And so you might wonder what's changed since 2007. Well, we've increased the population by about 20,000 new residents. That's an increase of the population of about 51%. And that's residential population. That's not counting all of the commuters and tourists that we've seen an increase in the valley here. In addition to growing in size and population, the city's also grown in footprint. We've added miles of roadway, increasing about 44% of roadways that we cover with our fire services and police services. So you may ask yourself, what's actually going to be on the ballot? What are we going to see as far as the questions go? There will be two questions. They're separate questions. One is for the Fire Station number 4 bond. That bond will be to build and equip a new fire station on the west side of town. And the second question will be a first responder mill levy. That's going to hire an additional 30 police officers, 22 firefighters, and 11 non-sworn staff between the two departments over the next 5 years. It'll be a phased-in approach. Why a 4th fire station? So today we serve the community with 3 fire stations, and you can see the map on the bottom middle of the screen is kind of the footprint for our response times, or what the travel distance is from our stations once we get a call. That leaves some pretty dramatic gaps across town, and in particular when one station has to cover a call out of district, then those gaps increase and we have very little corresponding coverage, or we have a hard time remapping our districts for those units that are still in service to provide coverage. So for example, if Station 1 responds to a call downtown, which is in their district, they might be relying on another fire engine to come from across town, and Station 4 would alleviate the pressure on our limited resources. Of course, everything with the fire service is about expedient response. Cardiac arrest survival rates have been shown that after every minute, we get a decrease in 10% of survival rates. So we want to get there as soon as possible, as quick as we can. In addition, we know that fire doubles every 60 seconds, and that means as soon as that call comes in, our clock is ticking to get units on scene to start providing fire suppression services. And so this Fourth station would also add capacity in a quick response unit. Quick response unit is a lighter duty vehicle that would take some of the pressures off of the heavy duty fire trucks that we drive around on the streets right now. And then the final point on this slide, an effective response force. This is the group of firefighters that would need to arrive on scene to handle the critical tasks of fighting a fire. So if we have 3 people on each fire truck and it takes 12 people to efficiently fight a fire in the city of Bozeman, we need more people. Right now, we've been drawing from our mutual aid resources, they've been a wonderful partner to work with. But as the city grows, we need to be able to handle more of our calls and more of those critical tasks on our own. I'll turn it over to Chief Veldkamp.
All right, thank you very much again for this opportunity to speak with you. What we typically don't have to tell people is that one of the main reasons and the main drivers for this is the growth. Growth is the sole reason for this. We need more capacity because the city has grown. You don't have to look far in town, in fact, just out this window, to see incredible growth that's happened in this community. And as Battalion Chief Short discussed, it's been since 2007 since we had any significant growth in public safety in our 2 public safety departments, and right now we are stretched very thin. I want to emphasize again, for more officers, the goal is not to just add 30 at one time. That's not good for the department, it's not good for the community, and I don't know that we could find that many at one time anyway. The goal is 6 officers per year over 5 years, and that is solely just to grow the department as the city continues to grow. So currently, every call that an officer initiates or comes in from the community is called a call for service. A call for service can be a traffic stop. A traffic stop takes 1 officer about 10 minutes to complete. So that's 10 minutes of officer time for that call for service. As the cases go up, for example, a theft report or a bar fight or a domestic disturbance, a scam, that's a full case. And every case is generated from a call for service and takes from an hour to 10 hours to 50 hours to complete. So what we're seeing is our calls for service are going up, but the content within those calls for service are getting more complicated. We're having more cases, more misdemeanor cases, and even more felonies than we have in the past. So more calls, more crimes are occurring, again, just due to more people in town, more cases, and as Battalion Chief Short mentioned, more roadways. With more roadways come more crashes, come more poor driving behavior, more cars, and obviously more roads are needed because there are more people. So the capacity issue, I'll go back to the last slide. That's right. It must mean my time's about up. As far as capacity, there are times when there are only 3 to 4 officers on shift at one time, and that is simply not enough. On my way over here, right before I left the station, I looked and there were 5 officers on right now, and between the station and here, I heard 2 domestic disturbances come out. You have to have at least 2 officers respond to each of those, so that pretty much ties up everybody. And if another call comes in, somebody has to clear that call, leave to go do that, or we have to ask one of our partners to come assist us. So we simply need more officers to handle the volume of calls and types of calls that we're seeing. I'm often asked, how many officers do we need? Well, our staffing plan, last staffing plan said by 2021, we should have 79 officers. We are currently authorized 4 years later for 76. So of the 30 that we're asking for, about half of those are to get us to where we should be already today, and the other half are to keep us caught up for the next 5 years. For investigations, the charts shown below show that our calls for service increased by 30%. That's not traffic stops. The reason we didn't include traffic stops is as the calls come in from the community, time to do traffic stops goes down. So the numbers stay generally flat or go up a bit, but more calls are coming in, meaning officers have less time to initiate their own calls. You can see the chart on the right, between 2022 and 2023 alone, felony cases submitted to the Gallatin County Attorney's Office increased by 29%. That is a very high increase just in 1 year. Some of those were felony arrests that were already made. Others were felony cases that we're requesting be charged by the Gallatin County Attorney's Office. So what would we do with this levy? One of the first things we've told the community we would do is establish a traffic unit. You've all seen driving behaviors get very poor in this city. You've seen people run red lights, you've seen reckless drivers, and oftentimes, if you've seen a patrol car, you've probably thought, why didn't that patrol car stop that car? The problem is that they often have 1, 2, or 3 calls pending in their car that they need to get to. They may be on their way to that domestic disturbance that's just verbal right now, but could turn physical. So they can't take a chance and stop a car in the meantime. So one of the first things we would do is have officers dedicated just to monitoring traffic. And that means traffic in a wide variety of manners, a wide variety of parts of town, including schools. We want to have an increased presence outside of the schools and the parks to keep our kids safe. Next thing we want to be able to do is properly investigate crimes. Right now, we're having to triage the calls that come in. So we're investigating the felonies and the misdemeanors, but not spending as much time on the misdemeanors as we would like to be able to. Officers want to solve crimes. Every single one, when they got hired, said they want to help their community, and part of that is being able to solve their crimes. But right now, they're often unable to. So for example, if an officer is called to a misdemeanor theft off of someone's porch, we want them to be able to actually take some time, see if there's doorbell video in the neighborhood, talk to some neighbors, take some time with that person. And right now, they just often don't have the time to do that. There's a sense of safety when an officer can actually show up in a timely manner and take some time to listen and investigate your crime versus an officer calling you back an hour or two later because they have so many calls going on, taking a report over the phone, probably sounding like they're in a little bit of a hurry, doing it in a hurried manner to try to get to the next thing. We want to be able to take that sufficient time, and we want to have sufficient officers to be able to respond to each call. If someone's breaking into your house, you don't want one officer to respond. You'd like about 4 to respond from different directions to increase the chances of being able to catch whoever's doing it. That's what we want to be able to do. So the final thing is we want to keep Bozeman a safe community. We all know our citizens have a very high expectation of the quality of life here, and we want to be able to continue meeting what they expect of us. People are moving here for a reason, and we want to keep that sense of safety that Bozeman currently has. One of the goals of policing is to prevent crime, not react to crime. So increased numbers of officers would allow us to be present in the community, educate the community, work in partnership with the community, be present at more events, and not just react and respond when a crime has already occurred.
So I get to talk to you a little bit about the costs. This, as we've said, this will ramp up. This is not hitting us all at once. It'll ramp up over about 5 years. This is a chart showing the monthly cost to a median single-family homeowner. I think that's close to $650,000 in this town. Oh, $652, it says right there. Thank you. Which is incredible, frankly. But that's where we are. And so it's about, at the end of 5 years, it'd be about $35. I realize the school board, you look at it, yearly cost per $100,000 in home value. I think that comes out to about $70 per $100,000 in home ownership, maybe 75, something like that. Mike, yeah. And then the bonds. Also, this is I got to say I appreciate the structure and the rigor the district brings to its asks for the community. This, I want to show you, this is something you guys are used to seeing. This is showing you how debt payments for all of the city general obligation bonds. The big red chunk there, that's the biggest chunk, that's the Bozeman Public Safety Center. The orange below that is the trails, and you'll see that kind of peters off in about 10, 12 years. We have Fire Station number 2, which replaces the old out-of-date Fire Station number 2 on South 19th. And then you see the Fire Station number 4. I think the reason why Fire Station 4 is so much bigger than Fire Station 2 is it reflects, frankly, the extraordinary inflation in the cost of building a public safety center today. And then just looking at another way of how that year cost adds, to just break down in a little more detail, year one, again, we're going to ramp this up. There's no capacity or even, ability to hire everybody all at once. We'll hire 6 police officers, 6 firefighters, and 3 non-sworn officers. That's one thing the city has been doing is pushing some of those duties off to non-sworn officers. We don't need to have a fully trained and dedicated police officer to do some tasks, but we do need staff to do some tasks. And then you can see how it kind of grows. Year 3 is the biggest one, where we're adding 6 police officers, 8 firefighters, and then 4 non-sworn staff. So, and then we're happy to take any questions you've got.
Thank you, gentlemen. Are there any trustee questions? Gary?
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate this information and totally support this. Just for clarification, both these items will only be voted on by City of Bozeman residents? The fire district doesn't expand outside of the City of Bozeman?
That is correct. And it is 2 different distinct questions. And I'm not sure if one passes and the other, like if the fire station bond issue passes and the staffing levy doesn't, I suspect we're not going to build the fire station because we just won't be able to staff it.
You mentioned mutual aid. There's some backfill with mutual aid right now when there's a call. Is that a fairly consistent situation where we're looking for mutual aid from the rural fire districts regularly, or what does that look like right now?
Thank you for your question. Yes, so anytime that we are called to a structure fire of any sort, the minimum required staffing based on national standards for the critical tasks that need to be completed on a structure fire, NFPA says it should be about 17 people. Now, we can't muster 17 people with our current staffing right now, so anytime that call comes in, we need to rely on Highlight Fire District, Central Valley Fire District, Fort Ellis, and other surrounding areas. It depends greatly on the seasons. As you can imagine, our departments get busier around like late summer when it's hot and dry, and then in the busy tourist season when we have a lot more people, a lot more foot traffic in town. So to specifically answer your question, I don't have the data right now. I can certainly get it to you, but some months we see a frequent everyday mutual aid call, and some months we might not have any.
Yeah, I'm just curious I don't need you to get me data, but I'm wondering if you have knowledge on, does that become a significant burden on those rural districts when they're constantly having to backfill because we're under-resourced and understaffed and needing to expand in the city of Bozeman? Do you have a feel for what that looks like?
Yes, absolutely. So anytime that we're borrowing staff from another district, we're taking their primary responders from them. So if a call then comes up in their district, and all the surrounding departments are much smaller than Bozeman, and many of them are volunteer. So when we call those resources, those folks into the city to help us out, then we're leaving larger gaps out in the county that we're just kind of hoping that nothing happens. There's some safety net with further out departments, and we try not to dive too deep into pulling all of their resources, but it does put a tremendous burden on their resources when we call them into Bozeman.
Do you guys know, well, thank you for the presentation. Do you guys know the process in the city moving forward on looking at the resources and how to get more? Because just looking at the beginning of it, it's the last time it was looked at was 2007. Yeah, in the last year or two, there's been a lot of growth in our area, but I mean, 17 years seems like a really long time to not be talking about it. And there's been other bonds that are not related to necessarily safety that have passed and been put forward. What's the process at the city to maybe keep this on a higher and not such a long period of time not looking at it?
It's a great question, Trustee Black. There are a number of, it's a somewhat multifaceted answer here. Part of it was that there was we're coming out of this, in the pandemic, we tried to keep as much off the taxpayer as possible, given that we were all kind of suffering. There's a lot of uncertainty. So there was in that sense, there was a lot of deferred maintenance over the past 4 or 5 years. Now, before 2020, it's a little harder for me to speak to, but the process kind of going forward is that I think there's an agreement or commitment certainly within the city to make sure we aren't accruing this kind of deferred maintenance going forward. This is a plan. We thought as a commission that kind of addresses that deferred the needs over the next several years. So we'll be adding again on over 5 years. So this gives us a runway to kind of address the needs as we grow. And then as far as kind of why it's been since 2007. I think there have been a number of needs in the city that we have been kind of chewing our way through. We're replacing a lot of 100-year-old water and sewer lines, as anyone driving down Main Street knows. We had to deal with facilities for our police and fire, the Law and Justice Center, the Public Safety Center, and that took a while to kind of sort out with the county. And one thing I have appreciated is that things at the city require a process, and things just don't quite happen overnight. So I don't know if that answers your question, but we are we've got a list of priorities, and we're working our way through that. I know that there was a little while where we were talking about working with the school district on a swim center and rec center, and that's partly, I guess, also because we also are trying to be responsive to residents and what we hear from residents. But I think right now, in the wake of coming out of the pandemic, as we start to with Fire Station number 2 replaced, with the Law and Justice Center set up, this has become a clear need. We're also hearing from residents that the sense of safety is being endangered. Somewhat like trust, if you lose that sense of safety, it's really hard to get back.
Gary?
Yeah, I just want to add something that's personal, but I benefited from quick response 3 years ago. So I think, to me, any voter should understand that they could be in that situation at any time, and it's critical that we have quick response on cardiac issues. So I've experienced that, and it made a huge difference. So I wish you all the best to get this passed, both of them. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for that. Again, I do think, as Chief Jeff Velkamp here mentioned, it really does, if you don't feel safe, if you feel like if you're put on hold, or if you have a crisis on your doorstep, and we only have 4 officers and they are dealing with 2 other domestic violence issues, that wait is interminable. Or if your loved one is experiencing a heart attack and it takes 10 minutes for us to get to you instead of 6, those 4 minutes can literally be a life.
I appreciate our relationship with the city of Bozeman. I appreciate the focus on our fundamental needs. I would love a pool by Gallatin High School, but it's much more important to focus on safety of our community and confidence in our citizens and fundamental infrastructure. And so I appreciate the priorities the city is setting right now, and again, the relationship with the school district and the city that we've had for decades, and appreciate you gentlemen coming tonight. So thank you very much. Up next, item 2.3.1, recognition of national merit semifinalists, principals Mills and Schnee. Hi.
Press that button on the right. There you go.
Got it, thanks. Well, my name's Erica Schnee, I'm principal of Gallatin High School, and I could not be happier to be before you to talk about Laszlo Baumgartner. Many of you know Laszlo, and I'm not going to spend any time today telling you that he's really intelligent and a wonderful student and takes a lot of AP classes because he's a National Merit semifinalist, so obviously many of those things go along with that. I am really excited to tell you about Laszlo as a human being because he is one of the top human beings that you could meet. I first met Laszlo, I was just figuring out the math on my way here. The spring of his 6th grade year, I had been named as the principal of Gallatin High School, and we were in the process of choosing the mascot and the colors. And it was a board meeting similar to this downstairs. And there were lots and lots of opinions about the mascot and the colors. You may recall, those of you that were here. And Laszlo was one of the only people that came to give public comment on what he thought the mascot and colors should be. And I wish I had brought it with me. I just had it out when Superintendent Bertram was at Gallatin High recently. But he brought a flyer advocating why he thought the Raptors were the best mascot for Gallatin High. And I was happy that he won. I agreed with him, so I was happy to hear him speak for that. But that's just one small example of the kind of thing that, like, for a 6th grader to come speak in front of the board is pretty intimidating. But Laszlo really takes to heart the idea of community-mindedness and giving back, and he is always seeking ways to help other people and serve others. And so even though he is very, very smart and intelligent and a hard worker and all those wonderful things that go along with being a National Merit semifinalist, he's also a wonderful, wonderful human being, and I'm happy to be beside him as you recognize him today.
Well said. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Erica. Thanks, trustees, and thanks, Superintendent Bertram, for having us tonight. Just a few other thoughts before I introduce the Bozeman High semifinalists. I feel very fortunate to be able to repeat this recognition on an annual basis every fall when we recognize our semifinalists. That is something I never want to take for granted because that doesn't happen in every school and every district that we have National Merit semifinalists from both of our high schools. I always enjoy looking back at the data, the number of students who take this test every fall. We have in this October 15th, I think we're doing the PSAT National Merit Semifinalist qualifying test at Bozeman High. And nationally and across North America, I think we have 1.5 million students who take this test every year, and about 16,000 students become semifinalists. So that puts them somewhere in the 1% to 2% range. Of those 16,000, about half of them will move on to the finalists, or about 95% move on to the finalist round, and then about half of those end up putting themselves in a position where they earn the National Merit Scholarship. So the work has sort of begun for these four behind us because they have a application packet to put together with our help to get into the running to be a finalist and then a National Merit Scholar. You know, and I always remind myself that the PSAT is one test in October and one test of many tests that these students have taken. But I think what we see in all four of these students is that the test is a reflection of intelligence, but also of years of doing things the right way in and outside of the classroom. From Bozeman High, I'm honored to be joined here by Asia Peterson. Asia is right behind me. In addition, of course, like Erica said, these are outstanding students, and we don't need to go through the transcripts and academic resumes. They're outstanding, as you would expect. But these are also the three students I have from Bozeman High are our quiet leaders in our building. They're very, very humble. I gathered these three on the front steps for a social media photo last Friday, and you didn't look like you really wanted to do that, but you played along, and I appreciate that. They were not running out there to meet me, but you were very humble, and I appreciate that. Asia is an outstanding scholar and leader in our building. A couple interesting facts about Asia. She actually qualified for the Montana Seal of Biliteracy as a junior, and that's a recognition that's typically reserved for a student who has completed the AP pathway or other means to demonstrate biliteracy. Typically that happens as a senior, and that's only for a small number of students, but she actually completed the requirements by the end of her junior year. Asia is one of our DECA officers this year, and so if history dictates, you should get used to seeing her at board meetings because we'll probably have some DECA recognitions later in the year. And Asia is also a team leader on our fast pitch softball team. Joshua, who's all the way to the pillar here, Joshua is also one of our DECA officers and also competes nationally in our VEX robotics circuit of competitions, and in fact manages to find unique ways to do DECA and VEX robotics seemingly at the same time. Will find himself in multiple places across the nation. The VEX's robotics circuit is really interesting to me because it's something that takes up a great deal of intelligence and also a great deal of time to be able to invest yourself into that outside of the classroom. And then Madeline Welsh is here with us tonight, another quiet leader in our building who I've enjoyed getting to know the past few years. Madeline's one of our section leaders in our esteemed marching band. A lot of leadership that goes into that dynamic organization. And this year, Madeline is president of our Rotary Interact Club. And our Rotary Interact is our student organization that works with the Sunrise Rotary Club here in town, and so she's one of our community service leaders in the building. So again, we have Asia, Joshua, and Madeline. Very happy to have them at Bozeman High and introduce them to you tonight.
Principal Mills, thank you. Any trustee questions for the kids? Sandy.
Congratulations to the four of you. Would someone remind me of what's going forward, what you're going to be doing to move to the next step? And perhaps even fill us in on what you've done so far, besides take the PSAT, right? And the process, I guess, I'm interested in.
So you have to submit an application. It asks you about like your extracurriculars, and it has you fill out about 5 activities, any awards that you do. It has you submit either an SAT or an ACT score and an essay. That can either be like an essay for like a college, or it can be an essay that like is on like a failure that you've had or like a place that you've grown, and any like work experience you've had, I think you also fill out. So
Leanna.
I just want to add my congratulations for all your hard work that brought you to this point. So I'm thinking you're a really good group of kids to ask for a good book recommendation. Like, what are you reading right now? You're finding interesting. With my recovery, I'm reading a lot. So if you've got one, I'd love to hear it. And it's okay if you don't, but just thought you might be a good group to ask.
See, I just finished reading Invisible Men for class, but don't really have a ton of free reading time right now, getting apps done and stuff like that. But if you like really dense, symbolic, metaphorical books, Invisible Man's, awesome for that. So.
Thanks, Laszlo.
You're all 4 seniors. Do the 4 of you know what you're doing next year, or is it too early to ask?
I mean, I think it's probably pretty early to ask. We don't really have our application results back yet, but I think all 4 of us are probably currently in the process, I know at least I am, of applying to colleges. So hopefully I'll be going out of state for school next year. yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. Lauren?
I also just wanted to say congratulations, and I don't have a question. I just wanted to reiterate what Principal Mills said in how amazing it is that we are able to honor students every year with this recognition. It's a really big deal, and we're, as a board, really proud of you.
Tanya?
So I do actually have a question. I'm just sitting here wondering, what does it feel like when you find out that you are a National Merit semifinalist? How do you find out? And then what is the initial reaction? One of you tell me that, and then one of you tell me who you called first.
Well, the way that you you find out that you get the National Merit Semifinalist is the PSAT gives you like an index score, and then there's usually like a bar for the index score. I think that the bar was like 207 this year, so if you go on like the app and you see your index score and it's like above that threshold, then you'll know that you get into the semifinalists. You usually figure out like as soon as you get the test results back, which is like in the fall of junior year. I think I probably texted my mom. I don't know.
Texted your mom. Okay.
I know for me, I didn't even look at the index score because I thought my score on the test hadn't earned me a semifinalist spot, so I didn't really find out until Principal Mills pulled me out of class, which was kind of intimidating, but yeah, I told my parents first, I think, and yeah, it was really exciting.
All right, thank you so much. It is my privilege to move that the Board of Trustees adopt the following resolution. Whereas approximately 16,000 semifinalists have been named in the 67th Annual National Merit Scholarship Programs from across the United States. And whereas semifinalists are designated on a state representational basis and are the highest scoring entrants in each state. And whereas Asia Peterson, Joshua Schwerin, and Madeline Welsh have been designated as Bozeman High School National Merit semifinalists, and whereas Laszlo Baumgartner has been designated as a Gallatin High School National Merit semifinalist. Therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Trustees recognize and honor Laszlo Baumgartner, Asia Peterson, Joshua Schwerin, and Madeline Welsh for this accomplishment.
Second.
Motion made by Trustee Reinhardt, seconded by Trustee Wilson. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion passes 8-0. Congratulations. Thank you very much for coming to our meeting. Principals Schnee and Mills, thank you. And if we could ask you to join Trustee Reinhardt outside for a picture, that would be appreciated. Thank you. Up next, item 3, action items, consent agenda.
I'd make a motion to approve action item consent 3.4.1.
Second.
Motion made by Trustee Black, seconded by Trustee Moran. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion passes 7-0. Item 5.1, board discussion. Discuss recommended revisions to policy 3141, non-resident student enrollment. Superintendent Bertram.
Good evening, trustees. During the 23 legislative session, one of the bills that moved forward was open enrollment. As a board, you have adopted already policy for the open enrollment cycle. As a reminder, we take those applications in January and will continue to do so moving forward. This is our first year living the open enrollment process. What we found is that the policy from the Montana School Boards Association was silent or didn't speak to a group of students that we are now encountering. So students whose families, they're resident students whose families move out of district during the school year and wish to remain enrolled for the rest of the school year. Previously, prior to open enrollment policy, we had a policy in place that allowed them to stay through the end of the school year. It's in best interest of the student and the family, not to increase the number of transitions. And then we would ask the family to pay tuition. With open enrollment, where families are no longer paying tuition, we need a mechanism in policy to be able to keep those students enrolled through the rest of the school year. They would also need to apply, because open enrollment is an annual event, they would need to apply this winter for enrollment next school year. So what you have is revision to policy 3141. It's a first reading for discussion this evening. Take any questions. It'll come back at a future agenda item on consent.
Any trustee questions? Sandy?
I don't have any questions, but I support this. I really believe in keeping the kids here for the entire school year and finding a way for us to do that. So I support this policy going forward.
Leanna?
Yeah, just a quick question. How many students roughly are we talking about? Like, what's it been?
Yeah, very, very good question. So to date, I think we have about 5 or 6 that are entertaining this idea. I don't know how many. They all have different move dates, and it's all contingent on real estate and all of those things. So I would imagine we're looking at a number under 10. We will hold all those and then bring them, similar to what we brought you on consent this evening. On consent, this evening was a group of students that were not involved in the original round last winter, and there's a caveat in the policy about extenuating circumstances that would allow the board to approve those outside of that window. I would imagine that the group size would be similar to that. We would collect them for a while and then bring them forward.
Well, I agree with Trustee Wilson's comments. For keeping the child in the center of the room, we want them to have continuity in their education and stay in the school district they're in. So you have my support. Any further discussion? Thank you. Up next, item 5.2, committee reports.
One committee report this evening. One of the standing board committees is the DOCC, District Ongoing Collaboration Committee. We had our first meeting of the year, September. A reminder that that committee meets monthly. That was born out of the long-standing way of doing business in Bozeman Public Schools, that we use a consensus process and that we solve problems at the lowest level possible. We have some new faces on the DOCC this year, in particular, new BEA president. So Eric Matthews was in that meeting, and then we are filling out the roster of grade band teacher reps. Just a quick update on the items being discussed. HR Director Pat Strauss gave an update on the Grow Your Own Teacher program. We've given that update to the board previously, that we used those permissive dollars in the Adult Education Fund primarily to fill our open special education positions for the 24-25 school year. We had a discussion about the staff well-being goal placeholder. That was part of the long-range strategic plan revision. We've adopted, moved away from the Human X Culture and Climate Survey, moved to a survey company called Panorama Education that has some survey questions nationally normed, much tighter correlation to what our teachers are telling us. So school climate, culture, how teachers are feeling within our building. That survey will be a 2-week administration beginning in October, I believe October 7th, second and third week in October. That will be baseline survey data that will then come back to the DOCC or a small group of the DOCC to actually set the measurable goal and the associated action plan for the long-range strategic plan, knowing that the Board of Trustees has final approval of what that goal looks like. We discussed negotiations for 24-25 with the potential for Mr. Eric Matthews to be in the legislative session as a legislator. We talked about breaking negotiations up into a fall and a spring, and we'll be setting some dates for that to talk about contractual language items in the fall. And then we, as you know, anything we do in the fall would be contingent upon what happens in the legislature. We'd come back together in the spring. Had a little discussion on Trustee Lucene and his project around the System of Education Consensus conversation that's scheduled for October 2nd and 3rd. Eric Matthews is working on BEA reps for that. We've been able to provide Trustee Lucene with building administration and central office reps for that meeting. Those were the main topics discussed. Take any questions. A reminder, trustees that sit on that committee are Tanya, Sandy, and alternate is Gary Lucene.
Any trustee questions? Thank you. 5.3 legislative funding priorities discussion. Mr. Waterman.
Good evening, trustees. We wanted to take a couple minutes and walk you through some discussion on the board's legislative proposals and priorities that we discussed about a year ago, some updates that are coming out of Helena, and just some overall background as we head into the election season and then eventually the legislative session. Our goal for this is a discussion item. We wanted to get your eyes on some things that you'll be hearing about at the MCEL conference that's coming up here in a couple weeks. Make sure that everybody's up to speed on what those proposals are and what their local impacts would be. And then we also wanted to kind of reconcile back the proposals that our Board of Trustees initiated with those things that are developing in Helena, and eventually bring this back to you for formal board action at a later meeting. So similar to a policy adoption, this is kind of a first reading, if you will, of what's happening. And then we'll be bringing back to you some election items that we will then move forward with when we understand who is representing our Bozeman area at the legislature this coming winter. So I've got a handful of slides for you. We've got 3 topics. Go ahead, V, to discuss. First of all, we're going to just refresh your memory on the resolutions that this board adopted about a year ago. We will talk a little bit about the state funding recap and especially the 99 mills and how state money is funded and where it comes from, local impacts is associated with that, and then some legislative proposals coming out of a coalition of education organizations in Helena, and then we'll, again, at the end, tie number 1 and 3 back together for your discussion. Casey, you good? Okay. All right. September 11th, 2023, right at a year ago, our board was very proactive about bringing forth some 3 resolutions, as it turned out, for consideration by the MTSBA, Montana School Boards Association General Assembly. Those approved resolutions that you all brought forward are listed up there. The Bozeman School District was one of, I believe, 2 school districts in the state that actually took advantage of this process. So the proposals were changing the process for discussing statewide education issues. This is the consensus process that Superintendent Bertram just mentioned with regards to Trustee Lucene's initiative, and the process discussions that are going to be happening in a couple of weeks here. October 2nd, I believe, is when they're happening here, 2nd and 3rd. Thanks. In Helena, with representatives coming from all over the state to discuss the system of education that we have, our delivery, and how we can work together to improve our student outcomes with all stakeholders in the process. The second one is updating the definition of basic system of quality education. As you recall, state law sets forth a decennial study, every 10-year study on the definition of quality education in our states, set forth by the legislature, and then the funding requirements that are needed to make that definition happen. 2025 marks the 10-year anniversary since we've last done that as a state. So we are due under law to have that discussion here probably after the 25 session, with some proposals coming out of that and into the 2027 session to actually make changes. So our board talked specifically about updates to that system, things that are not currently included in the definition that our communities require us to do. One of the examples was extracurriculars. There's obviously a significant desire and desire from the community to have good quality extracurricular activities and offerings as part of our school system. That's not in the definition of quality education right now. It's not something that's currently funded. Intervention staff, school lunches, those types of things. There's a lot of things that our community, we believe, expects of us and is not currently funded that we wanted to introduce into that quality education definition and move forward with it from there. The last thing is regional cost adjustments within our school funding formulas. We've mentioned several times. We're funded on a per student basis, and the amount of money that students in Bozeman generates is the same that's generated on a per student basis in Jordan, Montana, or Forsyth, or Ekalaka, or Eureka, all the way across the state. Same values on a per student basis for funding. There's no mechanism in the formula to adjust the amount of funding we receive based on cost of living. And as you all know, recruitment and retention of teachers has become a primary issue locally as we essentially deal with high cost of living in our area. So those are the three resolutions our board approved back in September 23. Those issues were taken to the MTSBA meeting in the fall of 2023 and approved and became part of the School Boards Association platform for the 2025 session. We wanted to talk a little bit about how I think a quick review of the state funding issues associated with education is important, especially in light of the 95 mills issue that's been surfacing the last year. I won't take a ton of your time. I just wanted to show you some slides that we looked at last year. The state of Montana is constitutionally required to fund quality education in our schools according to the definition that's in that law. In 2023, on the left-hand side, you see that the state, which we'll talk a little bit about here in a second, but the state is all of us still. The state funded $932 million worth of costs for quality education across the state of Montana. 2024, we saw a significant increase in property values, and a lot of that increase was concentrated in Gallatin County and in our valley here. However, the amount of money that the state put towards school-based aid increased by a little over 1%, from $932 million to $942 million. What you see in there is a significant change in distribution between where that money's coming from. The 95 mills is one of the mechanisms that's used to fund that. That's represented by the green bars in each one of those columns. And you see, as a result of the reappraisal that happened, the amount of money that the statewide 95 mills ultimately ended up generating increased by about a third, from $319 million to $426 million. Again, a lot of that growth happened in Gallatin County and was affected by our local taxpayers. But that didn't generate more money for schools. That just meant that the state had to subsidize those 95 mills with less of other revenue sources at their level. And at the state level, the largest revenue source is income tax. So you can look at that the gray columns there as income tax. So as we look from 23 to 24, again, the amount of money that the state contributed to education increased by 1%. Property value revenues increased by 33%, but all that did was reduce the amount of income tax that was required to subsidize that formula at the state level. Go ahead, Mike, to the next slide. This is another slide that we looked at. It is a selection of addresses of homeowners in the Bozeman School District up here. I won't take you through all of those lines other than the highlighted ones below. The first top highlighted lines is how much taxes on each one of these properties change as a result of the taxes levied by the Bozeman School District. Excuse me, the middle yellow line is the amount of taxes that those properties changed, again, as a result of the 95 mills. And then the bottom highlighted line is the total of the two previous ones. What we wanted to point out to you here is a couple things. First of all, the 95 mills in all of these cases caused tax increases higher than what the local taxes were for the Bozeman School District. And in some cases, those increases are very significant. The other thing I want to call to your attention as you look at that middle highlighted line, you'll recall as a part of the the legislative outcomes from 2023, the legislature approved and the governor signed into law 2 one-time property tax refunds of $675 apiece. Those are, if you go to the Department of Revenue's website, you'll see that those are categorized. They're called excess revenue refunds. So the state is saying that they're collecting too much revenue and they're sending back to you via an application process $675 per year. Now, if you look at those houses up there, you see that the $675 is usually enough to cover most of those increases, not in all cases, but certainly in some cases. The $675 is enough to cover those increases for those 2 years. Now, what you need to remember is that mechanism, the 95 mil, still exists in law. However, the $675 rebate runs out after this year. So the question becomes, there's still a lot of consternation about the 95 mil issue around the state. It's been resolved for the current year. However, as we look forward, it's still in law, so those increases will still remain in place, but the $675 tax rebates that are associated with them that were intended to offset those will go away. So the question becomes what happens to that money, and that's where we brings us to the legislative proposals that we wanted to review coming out of Helena. The bulk of them is called, we have to have an acronym for everything. So this one is called CAMPS. The Coalition of Advocates for Montana Public Schools is a collection of the Montana School Boards Association, School Administrators of Montana, Montana Rural Education Association, our association, School Business Officials Association. Am I missing any groups within that? The primary education advocates for our professional associations in Helena make up CAMPS. An important thing to note is that MFPE, the statewide public employees union, is not part of the CAMPS group, so they're not a part of this proposal. They have a handful of priorities we wanted to walk you through and show you what they're thinking, what you'll be hearing about in coming months, and reconcile those back to the priorities that our board established back in September of 2023. First one is the first topic, I guess, large topic, is a general fund overhaul, and specifically their first priority is catching us up on lost inflation. As you recall, schools are funded on a per student basis, and the amount that we receive per student is increased every year by state law at an amount not to exceed 3%. So if inflation on a CPI nationwide basis is below 3%, schools will get that CPI increase. If it's above 3%, as it has been in the last couple of years, we're capped at 3%. And what that effectively does is holds us back as far as our spending authority goes. Our costs are increasing at sometimes 9% the last couple of years, but our revenue is increasing at 3%, which obviously gives us some pretty significant financial challenges. The next slide shows a table of what's happening. This is looking back the last 6 years. See, the first column represents the state increase in base funding that we just looked at, the revenue sources for that. And then the second column represents what the legislature actually approved. And as you look at the numbers there, I'll look at 2020 and maybe I'll back up a second. I gotta essentially the legislature has the option of how they fund the increases, and oftentimes what they'll do. The legislature meets every 2 years, and sometimes what they'll do is backload the second year to keep costs down at the state level. So if you look at, sorry, I probably should have looked at this a little bit more. They'll backload it. The second year will get more funding than the first year in order to keep their costs down, but still get us to the 3% or inflation number, whichever's less. The big takeaway from this slide is that right-hand column. If you compare how much schools received as far as inflation goes on our revenue components to what's actually happened nationwide for the Consumer Price Index, you see that we're falling behind in virtually every year with the exception of 2021. Cumulative 5-year total, this isn't my slide, there's actually 6 years up there, but 10.39% is how much they're saying that we are behind on a percentage basis from inflation over the course of those last 5 years. CAMP's priorities is to gain back that lost inflation, kind of reset where we were relative to those numbers, remove the 3% cap from the state funding formula to allow schools to adjust inflation and receive revenue increases that are commensurate with our costs. Should I stop there for a second and ask for questions, or you guys know to interrupt if you have questions, things on? Leon?
Just out of curiosity, and if this is a quick answer, like other state agencies, are we similar to other state agencies on how inflationary increases happen in our budget, or are we different?
No, they're different. And I'm not an expert in how cities and counties are funded. But generally speaking, I think cities and counties get half the rate of inflation plus increases on newly taxable property, new property that comes online. The state can fund their own agencies at any level that they want. So I can speak to the education portion. I know others are different, but as far as those details, I don't know what that information is. Sorry. Okay. Other questions? All right. The formula focuses on the number of students that we have, and there's a desire in Helena to change that focus, shift it away from student count and move it towards something that's a little bit maybe more stable, and teacher count is the number that they're currently focusing on. If you step back at a statewide level, the number of K-12 students, the number of 18-year-olds and less that we have in the state is decreasing. And if you have a funding formula that's built on the number of students over time, that's going to result in funding challenges as our enrollments statewide decrease. So as they step back and look at this, they want to take focus off of the number of students and put it on teacher counts. If you want to go to the next slide up there. Right now, 81 statewide basis, this isn't Bozeman specific information, but right now in our general funds, 81% of our funding comes from the number of students that we have in our district. The next number down, basic entitlement, is just a flat amount that every district gets for being a district. 8%, and then quality educators is the number of teachers that we have in our schools, and that generates those teacher counts generate 3.6% of our funding. If you move to the next just shift your eyes, not the slide, to the right side of the table. What they're proposing to do, the CAMPS organization, is to reduce the reliance on student count from 81% down to 58%. Increase the amount of money that schools get for that basic entitlement, but the big change is the number of quality educators. The funding on that, they want to significantly increase the amount that we get for each teacher. This is a little bit of an issue for us as we look back to our budget reduction process a couple years ago. If we were to proceed with the funding formula the way this is, we would have, I'll spare you too many of the details, we would have had to reduce significantly more teachers than we did a couple years ago if this proposal were to come into play than under the current structure.
I think this notion that students are enrollment is declining across the state. A lot of the small schools, Class B and C, are excited about this proposal. If you're in a small community and you have one first grade and you have 20 students and that reduces to 16 students or 15 students, you still need that teacher in place. In the large AA's, when you have class size that would reduce to 15 students, but you have 30 first grades, it results in multiple reductions. And so while we managed reductions in our budget deficit via staffing at the middle school and high school level, we were also very communicative that from pre-pandemic to post-pandemic in our K-5 schools, we had reduced 10 FTE just because of student enrollment and us filling classes to accreditation standards. So while this is perceived as a big win for some small schools, you just have to pick up any newspaper and see the number of teachers that were cut in Helena, Billings, Missoula. Kalispell and Great Falls are headed into those processes very soon. We've worked through our process, and we have challenges with this funding formula change.
Tanya.
I'm curious the impact that we are expecting this would possibly have on special education, because that's been a consistent challenge over the years, I think.
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to that. So special education, I kind of stopped our conversation at the quality educator line, but special education is currently a portion of our general fund funding. So we receive money on a per student basis for special ed funding in our general fund. In addition to that, we receive the federal IDEA Individuals with Disabilities Education Act grant every year that funds some of our special education needs. And lastly, it's been a handful of years that the legislature opened up our tuition fund, which doesn't necessarily, in my mind, reconcile with special education, but they opened up our tuition fund and allowed us to permissively levy without a vote, taxes on our constituents to pay our special ed needs. So you'll see that there's not a whole lot of change with the special ed formula as a part of the general fund. We still do have access to those other two funding sources to meet the needs of our special education staff. The legislature, again, will look at if you talk to them, they will kind of defer the special ed argument in the general fund back to the tuition fund, saying that we've got the authority to get the money that we need to pay our special education costs. At issue, though, is where that money comes from, and that comes directly from our local taxpayers rather than the larger state as a whole. So not a whole lot of change in the general fund. They will point back to the fact that we've got access to local taxes to meet those costs. Did I answer your question? Okay. All right, next one. Also part of our general fund is a relatively new creation the last couple years called the TEACH Act. I'm going to, if you go ahead to the next slide. So I'll preface the conversation by telling you that statewide recruitment and retention of teachers is a significant issue. It doesn't matter if you're in Bozeman, whereas you have a high desirability to live here, but high cost of living, or another community in a different part of the state that maybe isn't as desirable to live, but also doesn't have that same high cost of living. Both schools are struggling with teacher recruitment and retention. I believe as the 23 session, there was the introduction of this TEACH Act, and this was the legislature's first stab at directly incentivizing schools to make changes to their salary schedules to especially recruit and not necessarily retain, I would say, but more recruit teachers. So the goal for the TEACH Act is to condense our teacher salary schedule, to get our beginning teacher pay, currently about $46,000, Pat, somewhere around there for beginning teacher pay, closer to our average teacher pay. So bring the top end closer to bring the bottom end closer to the top end as far as teacher compensation goes. The CAMPS group has introduced some priorities. Currently, the state law says in order to get this funding, your base salary for teachers can be no less than 70% of your average teacher pay. So the proposal is that there's a lot of schools that aren't able to do that. We haven't been able to get to that point yet. So the proposal now is to kind of have a step up to that 70% by fiscal 2030, so 5 years away from now. So they want to see in order to get the funding in fiscal 26, you have to be at 62% of the goals. Fiscal 27, 64, so forth on up to fiscal 30 to get to that full 70%. By way of reference, we are currently at 66% and 64% in our elementary and high school districts respectively, so we would meet those goals. And I guess what I would throw out to you is that there's a lot to do with teacher turnover. If you reduce the number of teachers you have, change the number of FTE you have, whether it be by attrition like we did with our changes, budgets, those are going to change those numbers that we have, and we could become in and out of not necessarily compliance, but I guess eligibility to get to that extra funding.
I think this also is causing a lot of conversation around the state because it changes the way negotiations happen for a lot of districts in terms of to get the new money, you need to bring up the base. Typically, you take that percentage and put it across all cells. And so in a lot of districts who are much further away from the 70%, they're having to significantly raise some of the cells, and they can't do that to all of the cells.
I would characterize that issue as kind of, as you step back, local control has always been a foundational element of our school districts in the state of Montana. The ability of local school districts to make decisions that they feel are in their best interests. While I think everyone would agree that teacher recruitment and retention is a significant issue, what this does is not only says, yes, we acknowledge that it's an issue at a statewide basis, it tells us how we must fix it. And I don't know that that's sitting well with a lot of school districts. My understanding is most of the unions across the state are not in favor of this particular element of the change, so it could become a little bit of a contentious issue. Local control is something that we talked about this summer when we talked about annexation and those types of things. And as we bring schools closer together and as we have more consistent requirements and expectations throughout the state, the less important, in my mind, local control becomes, and we get away from that local control issue. The next slide is county equalization of permissive general fund mills. Right now, mills are equalized at the district level. This will get really boring really fast, but the proposal is to equalize mill values across the counties. For our district in particular, there's still a lot of play. I didn't put any numbers up here just yet. That's for next one. That's a surprise. Okay. There's no. I didn't put any numbers up here, but just because our taxable value is still up in the air for this year, so we don't have really anything to quantify this with, and also because I don't expect the overall change for the Bozeman School District to be very big. Less than 5 mills, probably closer to 2 mills would be our overall impact. Not hugely significant in the overall scheme of things. The last slide for the general fund discussion is this graph that long awaited is our current general fund funding on the left, and then what our general fund funding might look like if the CAMPS proposals came true on the right. So a couple things you'll notice. You'll notice that if the CAMPS proposals go through, we would expect to see a pretty significant increase in the amount of money that we've got at our disposal in our general funds. You'll notice that there's an increase in other revenue. That's mostly the state funding, and there's also an increase probably in local taxes to accompany that. What you'll also notice up here is there's no numbers associated with that. That's not an accident. I didn't just forget to put them up there. I'm just not comfortable enough with all the moving parts that we have to really give you precision type numbers. The other thing you have to remember is that these are all proposals at this point in time. We don't even know who's going to be in the chairs in Helena voting. So this is all really, really preliminary information. That was the end of the general fund. We're going to move to the building reserve fund just briefly. Sorry, I forgot where I was headed with this. State funding. When we talk about state funding, there's a general thought that that's good. Additional state funding coming to our district is generally seen as good, but I think it's important to remember that all of us in this room are state taxpayers as well as Bozeman School District taxpayers as well. And it's important also to recognize that Gallatin County subsidizes the rest of the state in a pretty significant way. 17% of the income tax for the state comes from Gallatin County taxpayers, and 16% of our state's taxable value comes from Gallatin County as well. That's what that bottom graph represents there. So it's a good thing when state money comes back to our district. It originates here, it goes to Helena, and then it comes back to us. We like to see that. That's helpful to know that some of our more of our money would be coming back to us. But we need to recognize that we all have a vested interest in where this state money is going to, and we can't just see it as someone else's money because it's all of ours collectively. The next slide, I think, is the major maintenance fund increase. We do get a relatively small in the overall scale of things amount of money from the state for major maintenance improvements. That amount would double, going from $130,000 estimated to about $260,000. That's important. Obviously, the money would help as we look to make sure our buildings are up to snuff and meeting their needs. But it's also important to note that we've got our elementary building reserve. That's a voted levy expiring this coming year. So it's likely that our board will be asking for a renewal of that this coming May. So something for us to certainly watch as we move forward through the process. Then there is another. So those were the camps proposals. Our group of school advocates that were working through some numbers and what they think was important to move the general fund and major maintenance fund forward. There's also another group called STARS, which is another acronym that means, I have to read this one, Student and Teacher Advancement for Results and Success. That has also proposed some significant changes to that TEACH Act, the amount of money that we receive for condensing our teacher salary schedule. That could result in an additional $2 million to our district as if we're able to condense our salary schedule to meet those requirements. That would be part of our general fund as well. And what did I miss on that?
I would just say that as trustees, you had a hand in your resolutions in building out the camp's proposals. What you're seeing with the STARS Act is the first glimpse from the powers that be in the legislature on what they are looking at. So the camp's proposal is about $140 million in new money to Montana Public Schools. This STARS Act, which was commissioned by Legislative Service Division by Representative Jones and Representative Beatty, who are very influential lawmakers in Helena, is about half that amount, about $70 million, very much tied to the TEACH Act. There's 6 items in there. They're very similar to things we've come out of the legislature where there's sort of a carrot and a stick. You have to do a few things and then you get those results, or you get that new added money. So I would be, it's going to be part of our conversation, and I think you're going there. Part of our conversation is what are the priorities of our community, priorities of our school board. What I'm hearing from the leaders of, I was at School Administrators of Montana annual conference today, it's in Bozeman. What I'm hearing from the camps group is they are now sort of moving off their proposal and aligning with the STARS proposal because they feel it's a bit inevitable. That's what the leaders in Helena are wanting to wrap their mind around, and it does have new money for Montana's public schools. It doesn't solve the inflationary increase. It doesn't get the $140 million back in any way, shape, or form.
Can you go back, Mike, to there's a chart with green and gray on it. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. Keep going, one more. This is the slide that we looked at the start, talking about the 95 mills and how it didn't necessarily translate into additional funding for schools. Superintendent Bertram just mentioned $150 million worth of new money for schools. If you look at that changes in those green bars, it's not exact, but you're pretty close to that $150 million new number. So essentially what we could be talking about here is that everyone's property taxes increase because of the 95 mills, and you got that $675 per year back intended to offset that. Well, if the legislature doesn't give the $675 back to you and retains the 95 mil structure, they're most of the way to that $150 million revenue figure. Does that make sense?
One more time.
So everyone's property taxes increased last year as a result of the property revaluation in the 95 mills. For this year and last year, you also got that 95 mil revenue increased by 100, the green bar, 319 to 426, somewhere $110 million roughly statewide. The cost, the price tag on these proposals that Superintendent Bertram just mentioned is $150 million. The legislature can get the bulk of that $150 million new dollars by just retaining the 95 mil levy structure, but not returning the $675 in excess revenue collections via the property tax rebate. Did I do okay on that? Okay. Okay, so back to the second to last slide. Keep going, keep going, keep going. One more right there. Just kind of wrapping things up. Other factors at play. Superintendent Bertram mentioned that the STARS proposal was kind of the brainchild of some of the legislative leadership. We can't overlook the importance of politics and what's going to be happening in the legislature. Ultimately, these are political decisions made at the legislative level and then ultimately proposed to and signed off on by the governor. There's a lot of times that schools wish we would had X, Y, and Z included in the funding formula, but the fact is they're not political realities. And so to some extent, we have to take what we can get when it comes to funding, even if it isn't exactly Plan A as we would draw it up. We need to be open to changes within those to match the political reality. The next thing is the state budget. Again, the state is all of us, and when the state money comes back to the Bozeman School District, that's a good thing, but that money has to come from somewhere, whether it be income tax revenue for the state, property tax revenue for the state. That's all of our money, and the state has to come up with a balanced budget as well. So gives and takes certainly from their perspective when they're managing the state budget. Scarcity, I just want to, warn the board that I don't think we're ever going to be in a position, no matter if $150 million is added to statewide education or $300 million or $500, I don't think there's any number that could ultimately say, oh, we don't have a problem with money at all anymore, ever. That's just not our reality. I think we could always pay our employees better. I think we could always add people to our staff to help students' needs be met. I don't think there's necessarily a limit to that, so I don't want you to leave here with the impression that, oh, our problems are going to be solved after the 25 session and we're going to be good to go and never have to hear from Mike and Lacey again. The last thing is local control. We already visited about this. Just as we move into kind of an era where the legislature is dictating not only what the problems are, but how we're going to solve them, we take away from local control. The last slide that we have up here we want to bring to your attention is kind of just, again, full circle, reconciling the resolutions you all approved back in September 2023 with what the CAMPS group and then more recently the STARS group has proposed. The consensus process, the trustee Lucene is embarking on isn't anywhere in these other proposals. It's something that's initiated here. It's a grassroots effort in Bozeman. Trustee Lucene is leading that. It's moving forward, but it's not a part of the process that we're looking at the statewide level. Hopefully some of the outcomes will make their way up there and it'll change the way we actually do business, but as far as the language that you'll see in legislative proposals, it's not a part of those processes. The other two, updating the definition of basic quality education, and then regional cost adjustments in the funding formula are a part of the CAMPS proposals. So the words aren't the same. The way that they're looking at it isn't the same, and perhaps again they're going to look a little bit different than what we would like. It might be entry-level regional cost proposals that are going to be proposed for the general fund formula. They might not get us to where we need to really help us offset those cost increases, cost of living increases in Bozeman, but hopefully it'll be a baby step in the right direction. So we want to open it up for discussion. Again, our intention is to ultimately have a recommendation coming back to you at a future meeting with regards to this and how we want to pursue legislative resolutions as we actually embark on the session.
And as I mentioned, I think what you're going to see, if I was predicting what's going to come out of CAMPS and MQEC and those groups in future weeks, is a shift from that $140 million proposal to the STARS Act that's about $50 to $70 million. There's conversation around there's an appetite to support public schools, knowing that those inflationary increases have been very challenging for us, and that we can't get it all at once. And so the CAMPS group is talking about supporting the STARS Act that has veteran leadership in the majority in the legislature, and then using the decennial study to get at the rest of the pieces of the puzzle. I just wanted to add one more item. The regional cost adjustments in the STARS Act looks very similar to the bill that Representative Eric Matthews proposed a year ago or 2 years ago in the legislature, an increase on the max budget in communities that qualify as regional high cost of living, but it would go to voters to go above that max. And this proposal from the STARS group also requires that any of those dollars raised via that levy would go to housing stipends for teachers or district-approved housing. Those would be the only options.
So it's an interesting thing is high cost of living, and then the solution would be to impose property taxes to address that hike. So it's a kind of a circular argument that we'll often find ourselves in when it comes to school taxes. We'd be happy to answer any questions with regards to any of this
Did you
stuff.
say circular or sick?
I think
You said sick. I think that hit that on the head.
We're happy to answer any questions that you have on any aspect of this or direction that the board would like to take going forward.
Sandy.
What's next for these two groups? Like, what's the next steps for them as we move towards finding someone to carry these bills in Helena or whatever?
Yeah, I think what's next is the camps group, which were those 4 entities that Mike mentioned, plus MQEC. So I think there's 5. They're going to come together and I think formally endorse this STARS initiative. And then at that point, once you have the sort of the final advocacy, then this board needs to determine if we are just going to support that stance or if we're going to put forward other legislative priorities. If we put forward other legislative priorities, we would need a plan for advocacy and work on the Hill during the session.
Thank you.
Leanna.
Thanks for all of that, Mike. Just like that was a very thorough review of what we've been talking about, and I really appreciate just reminding myself all of that we've gone through. There's a lot in there to digest, and I guess I just want to say for our board, anytime that we can tune into a House Interim Education Committee meeting, I mean, in our copious spare time, since we're all volunteers, of course, what we're able to do, but like especially now as the legislative session heats up or comes to, just being on top of what the conversation is, so we can know, what is the best way to continue that conversation and everything. So this really helps to position us to do that. So thank you.
It's almost a whine that I have. I feel like when your kids come to you and they say, hey, can we talk about my allowance? And their intent is to get the allowance to go up. I feel like that's what we did with resolution number 3 last year when we brought it to MTSBA. We were asking, can we relook the funding formulas? And it feels like the answer is absolutely. And we're at risk of the formula hurting us instead of helping. Am I hearing that correctly?
I think there's a couple different ways to look at it. I think that it's a sources and uses issue, where the money's coming from and then where it's going to be used. So each of these proposals will give us more money to spend. Some of them will handcuff us as to the way that we actually have to spend them in order to get it. And then the thing we need to look at and be constantly aware of is where that money comes from. The board's historically taken a really strong stance on property taxes. We've got the lowest taxes of all the AA districts in the state. We're proud of that. So it's something that we take seriously. We know that we have an impact on cost of living, and we're trying to mitigate that as well. But at the same time, address our core purpose and make sure that students are getting the education that they needed. Did I answer your question? Kinda. Give it to me another way and I'll...
I'm probably just pontificating that we're really going to have to get smart on these two options, stars and camps, and be able to engage with the legislative leaders and the interim committee and track what Gary's doing. I think that's going to be essential. I think it could get really complicated really fast.
Gary?
Yeah, this is a complicated issue that is going to take time to really resolve. But my view of it is that the legislators and the camps group that are trying to direct this, while they're doing the best they can, I don't think they're hearing from or listening from our communities on what do people want in their schools and in their communities, and how do they want it funded. So I think as we move forward, I mean, to me, it's important that we have community members weigh in on some of these things and at least help guide our board on where should we go with this, because at some point, somebody's going to have to stand up and just state the reality of this situation and try and get some effort moving in the right direction to revisit that funding formula. The decennial next year, every 10 years, to me, that's way too long. It needs to be done every 4 years or something like that. But I think we need to hear from our community members that are advocates for our public schools and for their kids and grandkids, and let us know what they think.
My comment is we cut 4.1 million from our school budget 2 years ago. And then I always remember that year, the state collected, tell me if I'm way off on this, but hopefully I'm good enough for what I'm trying to say. The state collected, I think, around 53 million from Bozeman taxpayers. Went to Helena, 49 million came back, which is a total coincidence, but that's also 4 million, which is exactly how much we cut that year. And that equity in school formula, equity in school funding formula that I think has been a law since like 1992 is the reason, or is a reason for that. And I was kind of watching for that, because that's always stuck in my head. We cut 4.1 million that exact same year. We sent 53, got back 49, which is 4 million. Did I see anything regarding that topic in anything that you just presented?
Not directly, no. The delta that you're talking about, that 53 versus 49, and I don't remember exactly the numbers, but I do remember the $4 million delta that you're talking about. That was a discussion around those 95 mils. So no, you didn't see that up there, but your recollection's correct.
I guess the reason I'm bringing that up is it would be nice if that would be a part of the conversation at that state level as well. The quote unquote equity in school funding formula in Montana is not equitable. It's hurting Bozeman, so. Any further discussion?
Superintendent Bertrand, do we have what we need to bring back a recommendation for a future meeting? Or does the trustees have concern supporting those camps proposals and the STARS proposals, I guess, is my direct question.
I feel like a logical next step is wait to see what happens with camps. If camps switches their gears to STARS, then we can come back with a little more detail around all the pieces of STARS and how that's going to impact our school district, whether we are net winners or net losers on some of those things. I think until this board has that type of detailed information, it would be hard for you to support or not support the STARS proposal.
I'm seeing nodding heads. Thank you. Up next, 5.4, MHSA athletics participation and proportionality discussion. Oh, did you have another question, Tanya?
I had one quick comment. I just wanted to restate for the minutes that the work that Gary is doing October 2nd and 3rd is in Bozeman, not in Helena.
Thank you.
Good evening, trustees. I'm going to sit over here so I can see all of you. We have a presentation this evening. As you've watched athletics and activities, we've had a lot of conversations related to athletics and activities tied to the budget reduction process, tied to your proposals, where, as Mr. Waterman mentioned, the cost of athletics and activities not built into any funding source that comes out of our general fund. You're also seeing conversations around high school baseball evolving across the state. We've seen in the newspaper and from our AA colleagues, different communities approaching it in different ways. And as our administrative team has dove into this topic deeply in the last few weeks, and also working with district legal counsel, we thought it was time to come to the Board of Trustees on important topics. My experience with this group is that we like to start and end with the Board of Trustees. So starting with you, engaging with our community, then coming back to you in the future for any sort of action. So the three of us, Mr. Van Vieren, Mr. Ader, and myself, will be walking through this. I am asking Chair Neal that this is a conversation I would ask you to take public comment on. I think it's an important conversation to our community. I know that there's a lot of folks in the audience that are here to talk about high school baseball in particular. And with that, we'll be handing out some handouts along the way to trustees, and those are also linked in the presentation. We'll make sure this presentation is shared with you and also shared publicly. Mr. Van Vieren.
Okay, so I think what we're going to cover at the beginning of this presentation are the items that govern our decision-making when it comes to activities in high school sports. And that's going to be both at the federal level and at the state level. So this first slide just goes over Title IX, and you can read through the whole piece of it. But I think pieces to consider is that just based on sex, be excluded from participation, be denied benefits, or subject of discrimination for any organization, and we are included in this organization pool that receive federal funds, right? We receive federal funds through title funds and also the IDEA funds, and that's at the tune of about $1.3 million that we receive that we know supplement our budget. So under Title IX, it requires students or schools to provide equal opportunity based on sex when it comes to participation in activities. And the link that you see here, OCR guidance, that's the handout that's going to be coming around right now. When looking at it at Title IX with athletic or activity programs, Title IX looks at it in two parts. The first part being the benefits, opportunities, and treatment given to boys and girls teams, and how a school is meeting student interest and abilities. So Title IX, once again, looks at it in those two parts, and then we're going to talk about each one of those parts. The first part is pretty straightforward. Benefits, the opportunities, the treatment given to boys, and this includes all these categories that are listed here, making sure that we're providing the same opportunities and benefits of athletic programs for both boys and girls throughout the district. And looking at the type, making sure that we have coaches that are in proportion to coaches of other sports and size of sports and that. Any questions on that part? Okay. So how a school is meeting students' athletic interests and abilities, Title IX looks at this part as 3 prongs. The first prong talks about substantial proportionality, And what that means is that as closely as possible, we want to align with our general student population. So you look at the percentage of boys and percentage of girls in our high schools, and we want our participation in athletics to mirror that proportion, that percentage for boys and girls sports. The second prong would be the history of continuing practice. Can the school show that it's continuing practice at expanding the athletic programs to respond to the interests and abilities of the underrepresented sex in this prong? And prong 3, interests and abilities of students. Can schools show that despite disproportionality, it is otherwise meeting the interests and abilities of the underrepresented sex in this?
I think it's important to note in this 3-prong test that you don't have to meet all the prongs. It's one. You need to show that you are in good standing with at least one of those prongs. However, as you move through the test and as we move through it, we're going to show you where we're at with all 3.
And so that's the federal level. Title I, once again, or Title IX is the federal level that helps govern our decision-making. Ridgeway settlement is at the state level. And so Ridgeway settlement came around, filed 1982, and the settlement agreement is in 1984, and it sets the minimum standard for defining gender equity in Montana's high school athletic programs. And if you look at the very first paragraph, the intent of that, it is basically talking about making sure that we're advancing opportunity for female students. It's ensuring equity for both boys and girls in athletics in high school, and then it's also providing an accessible grievance procedure. So if things are out of proportion and they're not correct, then there's a procedure for filing and moving forward with that. It's also important to note that Ridgeway is very focused on the Title IX Part 1 and the benefits, opportunities, and treatment given to both boys and girls teams. And Ridgeway is less focused on how a school is meeting student athletic interest and abilities. Okay.
And the purpose of that, or the reason that is so, is the Ridgeway settlement was very focused on the items of note in Part 1. And so, really looking into were the opportunities provided for females at the time consistent with the opportunities provided for males.
Next up, MHSA has a self-assessment tool, which Mr. Bertram is currently passing out. The assessment tool is an optional tool. It's not required by the MHSA. It's tightly correlated to the minimum standards detailed in the Ridgeway agreement. Overall, there are no BSD 7 issues as it relates to benefits, opportunities, and treatments of Title IX, Part 1. BSD 7 will formally complete the self-assessment process during the 24-25 school year. We will share results with trustees and community.
Tanya.
Have we done that prior years?
It has, my understanding of this is that it has ebbed and flowed based upon MHSA leadership in terms of what is expected. And so in Mark's tenure and my tenure in central office, we're not aware of any self-assessment that was completed nor required. With this conversation around high school baseball heating up across the state, it's time that we dig back into this.
It was more prevalent prior to 2018, and since then it's changed. So some of you who have been on the board for a while, we had to do this every year, and until 2018, 2019, then MHSA leadership changed and their point of view changed a little bit on that. How is Part 2 assessed in Bozeman Public Schools? Substantial proportionality is the male and female participants on athletic teams, about the same to the percentage of males and females enrolled in school. No male participation rates are higher than female participation rates. The district would like to see a variance at or below 5%. Prong number 2, history and continuing practice. Can the school show a history and continuing practice of expanding its athletic programs to respond to the interests and abilities of the underrepresented sex? Yes, the district had girls wrestling beginning in the 2021 school year. and schools continue to work and grow participation in other female sports. Prong 3, interest and abilities of students. Can the school show that despite disproportionality is otherwise meeting the interest of the underrepresented sex? No, not this time. The district has not run a survey since before the addition of girls wrestling in 2020. The three-prong test was a big part of the conversation rationale for adding girls wrestling in 2020. There's a headline from the Bozeman Chronicle accompanied by an article, Bozeman Schools OKs girls wrestling in hopes to close the participation gap. These were the numbers that were presented in 2018, 2019. As you can see, we were at one school at a time, so those are Bozeman High's numbers, male and female.
And you'll notice like about 50-50 in terms of our student enrollment, but about a 6% variance. When you read that Chronicle article, they talk about a 12% variance. It's really a 6% variance. If you're tipping the scales, we need to increase female participation and in 2018 and 2019 by 6%. And again, that 5% number that we set for a goal is sort of the standard across the country in talking with district legal counsel. And it's important to note that Bozeman's district legal counsel is also the legal counsel for MHSA. So is very well versed on these topics. Once you get under 5%, less worry about the three-prong test and disproportionality. Anything over 5% is a red flag.
The next slide shows you the numbers from the last school year, 23-24 school year. You'll see that we have a variance of 6.2% there.
So we added girls wrestling, and we'll show you on the next screen, there's not a lot of girls wrestlers. So it hasn't really moved the needle. What you're also seeing is some discrepancy between the two schools. So Bozeman High, around a 3%, and then Gallatin High around a 9%. So, and when you dive into the numbers, that's really what that equals is a very high participation rate in Gallatin High School football program.
Our next slide is the number of participants for each sport offered by each high school. The big number there, we put in gray football just simply because you can see that, that's male participants, and that is a large number participating for both schools. Incident, just so you realize, these numbers, we collect these each May, and we file them with the MHSA through an OPI portal. So, OPI collects the information. They do this for all sports as well as clubs too. So we submit that report in May. BSD 7 athletics and Title IX status and next steps. Bozeman Public Schools appears to be in good standing with this part of Title IX. No issues or red flags. We'll complete the self-assessment during the 24-25 school year and address any areas that are flagged. Bozeman Public Schools is currently in full compliance with the three-prong test, as we can substantiate using prong 2 for this portion of Title IX. We're addressing disproportionality by working to increase female participation rates and complete an updated student interest survey. Will be done at the high schools this year.
What's coming around is that student interest survey. It's a sample survey provided by MHSA. Again, it's optional. We're going to complete the self-assessment and the student survey. We've had preliminary conversations with Principal Schnee and Principal Mills about how this is going to fit into their school year to ensure that all of our enrolled students at Bozeman High and Gallatin High and Bridger Charter Academy have an opportunity to take the survey. We will do it not in a paper pencil, but Google fashion, and we will share those results with the board. Those results will also be important as we move forward talking about next steps.
The MHSA sanctioned baseball as a sport for boys in 2023, with the first season beginning March 21st, 2023. The first MHSA baseball state tournament was held that year. 25 schools and 21 teams competed in the inaugural season. As you can see, AA participation, spring 23, we had Butte and Belgrade. Spring of 2025, which will be upcoming, will be the Billings and Missoula schools, so that'd be 6 more. And then spring of 2026, Gray Falls is planning on fielding baseball teams, so that would be 2 more. So that'd be a total of 6 to 8, 10 for the AA. Statewide, just one more thing to add to, I'm just going to throw this in here real quick. In terms of the human rights, or Bozeman schools, the AA schools, just to be clear, so the AA schools are currently under, I don't know if it's investigation, would be the correct word, for issues revolving around softball. And the specific issue is softball scheduling. So right now, all we've done is submit information. We submit information. When they ask for information, it's information regarding all sports in terms of practice schedules, game schedules, locations, and participation numbers. We've simply supplied information right now with that, and we're waiting to see where we go with that in the future.
Our district legal counsel, Calava Law Firm, is representing all the AA schools involved in that OCR complaint. With those complaints, there's tight timelines for us to submit our information. We did all that. And then there's less tight timelines in terms of when you hear back. So that one is still pending.
Statewide Title IX conversations brought to our attention and date regarding baseball have been very focused on the equal sports part of Ridgeway. Adding girls wrestling provide one more female sport versus male sports in the AA schools. Statewide Title IX conversations brought to our attention to date regarding baseball have been largely absent of discussion of proportionality in the 3-prong test. In summary, Title IX could be used as part of an argument for and against adding baseball. However, common sense and legal counsel has advised us that it would be highly unlikely for a claim to be substantiated that Bozeman Public Schools is out of compliance with Title IX for not adding a male sport in a community where a large number of males already compete in baseball, and in a high school setting where boys disproportionately are part of the high school athletic program.
So when you think about the conversation of adding a male sport, and when I worked with district legal counsel on this, you don't get to pick and choose between Part 1 and Part 2. Both of those are part of federal law. Both of those are part of non-discrimination policy built into our policy handbook. And so Ridgeway is very focused on Part 1. And in Part 1, it says equal sports. However, Ridgeway was adopted to increase female participation in Montana sports. I have not heard in any of the communities that we've talked about, AA communities, around adding baseball, sharing of disproportionality data, sharing of the 3-prong test, and when talking about this presentation with district legal counsel, had 100% assurance that we are be held to both parts of Title IX, and we need to take both parts into consideration before making any decisions around adding any sport. So the district has spent time exploring baseball. I, in no way, as a superintendent, want to inappropriately put roadblocks up providing opportunities for kids. That's not who I am. And actually, baseball was like 100% part of my life for 25 years. Played, coached, high school, college baseball, and I love baseball. However, as putting on the superintendent hat, I have to make sure that we fully vet the Title IX implications of adding baseball, as well as the budgetary and facility-related barriers. And so what I'm bringing forward today is a recommended pathway forward that I want trustee feedback on. This is not an action item. This is prepared very much proactively to get your feedback on before moving forward. And then we intend to fully engage with the community on this topic, because behind me are a whole bunch of people passionate about baseball that want to help us and want to help us move forward. So what I have is an if-when pathway. It's very much on purpose that it's if and then. and I'll walk you through that. So what does the pathway process to adding additional MHSA male sports such as baseball in Bozeman Public Schools look like? This is what I think it looks like. If we're going to actually address the Title IX implications of this decision, we need to do the student interest survey. The student interest survey should guide what we do and don't do. And so I predict we're gonna hear a variety of things on a student interest survey. We know that this fall, when Bozeman High School moved to Bozeman and Gallatin High School, we increased opportunities for kids overall. We decreased opportunities for kids at each high school in particular. So for example, when we had one large Bozeman high school in basketball, for instance, girls and boys basketball, or in volleyball for our girls, there was a freshman A team, a freshman B team, so multiple teams at the freshman level. That moved away when we went to two high schools. I predict that when we do a student interest survey, we're gonna hear from the 30 girls at Gallatin High School that were cut from the freshman volleyball team. About their opportunities for participation. I believe we're going to hear from the baseball community and boys within our school district that want to play high school baseball. We're also going to hear from students who play lacrosse, and we're going to hear from girls who are looking at other AAs that have girls flag football. And we're going to get all of that information, and that's going to help guide ultimately the trustees in your decision-making moving forward. So one, we need to respond to the student interest survey and have that as a guidepost. We also need to address gender proportionality. And that data variance, in my opinion, needs to be under 5%, including the hypothetical addition of baseball participation before moving forward. Otherwise, and in the guidance of our district legal counsel, who's well versed on Title IX, we are opening ourselves up to a Title IX challenge. We're already in a Title IX challenge, and we're opening ourselves up to an additional Title IX challenge by adding baseball. As I mentioned, and I don't want to speak for other communities, I haven't sat through all their board meetings. I meet with AA superintendents weekly. I just haven't heard any of those conversations in those communities related to disproportionality. I would suspect, due to the nature of Montana high school football, that they have disproportionality, that they have more males and females participating in their high school athletic events. So the if is we need to address the Title IX implications. If those are addressed appropriately, we move to the then, and there's logistical implications that are there for any sort of startup of a new activity. We've been talking about budgets this evening. In talking with district legal counsel, we would have about a 1-year window to require or engage the community in support upfront, securing private fundraising to launch the startup costs associated with baseball. What you're seeing in other AA communities is a 2-year plan or a 3-year plan where they're expecting the community to bear the costs of those. We've been advised anything over a year opens yourselves up to the Ridgeway settlement and challenges that the opportunities provided for baseball players are different than the opportunities provided for our other sports because they're having to fundraise 100% of the cost for multiple years. So that's a secure private fundraising is a logistical implication. Establish a long-term MOU with the Legion program for season dates, partnership, synergy. It's not going to work to have, or I don't think our board would move forward without this piece in place. If you had Legion programs running concurrently with the high school baseball season, serving the same group of students or potentially different group of students, that could be challenging. It is my understanding a year ago there was a MOU between MHSA and Legion around that synergy to not start till after Memorial Day. And what I heard just this week from my AA colleagues is that MOU is going away. And so there's becoming some competition in Missoula and in Billings in particular around that synergy. That's something we would need to address. Right now, we don't have any baseball fields. So establishing a short-term community, city, county field space rental agreement, that would be a priority prior to moving this forward. And then as we do for all things facility, we have a process for that. So convening the long-range facility planning committee to address long-term baseball field infrastructure so that we can avoid high rental costs from city, county rentals. 5, conduct a process to include the cost for baseball year 2 and beyond in the existing and fixed athletics budget. So as you know, we went through a $4.1 million reduction. A result of that was a 10% decrease in all budget areas. So we told Mark Ader, run the same number of programs, the same number of travel dates, the same number of coaching stipends with 10% less funds than you currently have, which means private fundraising had to kick in. To add baseball long-term, we would need to be able to fit all of the cost for baseball beyond year 1 in that fixed existing budget. And then finally, I think if we addressed all of those important logistical implications, final approval would be of this board and of the MHSA board. Is that all our slides? Yep, I think that's it. I would stand for any questions, and again, request that Chair Neal take public comment on this item.
We'll start with trustee questions. Gary.
Thank you guys very much. If I understand this correctly, this would be a Bozeman School District team. Would that include both Bozeman High and Gallatin High as one team?
No, it would be at least 2 teams and likely 4 teams with JV and varsity at both schools.
Good, thanks.
It would not be a Bridger charter team because they're participating in their either at Bozeman High or Gallatin High.
Tanya.
Can you tell me what the timing of the student interest survey was going to be?
Yeah, we're looking, so the high school has a lot of change going on right now, as you know. New block schedule, intervention extension periods, teacher collaboration time. The beauty of that is the intervention extension periods does provide an avenue for all kids in the building to take a survey like this and to give them time to do that and not have it conflict with core instruction. So I'll be working with Dan and Erica. My hope is that we can do it sometime this fall.
Is this one of those that we have to get approval from parents on, or?
No, it's anonymous. So no, we don't have to get approval, and it doesn't ask any inappropriate or questions related to human sexuality.
Gary.
Will the survey go out to, I'm assuming freshmen, all grade levels, or will that include middle school?
It won't go to middle school. We're anticipating just doing all current high school students. And again, I know you're going to take public comment, and that is very important. I hope to leave today with guidance from the Board of Trustees around this if-then pathway.
Any further trustee discussion or comments or questions before we move to public comment? Sorry? 5-minute break. After we're done with the questions, if that's okay. Leanna?
So you talked about a year-long timeline. So I'm not familiar with this process. Is that all doable in a year, or what do you potentially see as like barriers or problems with that?
I don't believe I spoke to any timeline. I'm just saying this is, I'm recommending this if-then pathway. So if we go back to the ifs, we need to respond to the student interest data, and we need to fix disproportionality. We've been trying to fix disproportionality since we added girls wrestling in 2018, 2019. We would need to engage in what are some other avenues of fixing that. Right off the top of my head, adding a freshman B girls volleyball team, my inbox is filling up with comments around that already, because you have very engaged and high-quality girls volleyball players who are playing club and traveling, and then they don't make their freshman team, and that feels crummy for all involved. The reason I say volleyball is if we move to the basketball arena, then we're having to do the same thing on the boys and girls side, and we don't fix the disproportionality. So that, to me, that's the number one goal, is respond to what are the interests of our students and have the proportionality of participation at our high schools mirror our student body. As soon as we get that, I don't know what the timeline for that is. As soon as we get that in place, then the logistical stuff kicks in. I know that we have a very supportive community that will make the logistical pieces happen. I just know there are barriers we need to address. I know we can address those logistical ones in a timely fashion. I don't know what the timeline on the if is.
Sandy?
Well, I'm going to say that I really like this if-then because there's so many unknowns that we can't put a finger on. We don't know the interest in baseball, and I'm all for giving kids opportunities to do as many things as they can within the parameters of what we have, what we're able to do at the school. But I also feel like we need to be responsible in that plan. And I really like the idea of the interest survey. And it's interesting that they leave a blank that you can write in there. Neither one of my kids played high school sports. They did gymnastics and hockey. So there's all of those other things that are aligned around out there. So I think this is a really well thought out plan that outlines the things that we need to think about, the things that we need to do, the information we need to gather before we can do anything, really. So I really support this, Superintendent Bertram, moving forward. And I love baseball. I played softball for 20 years. I mean, I love baseball too. I just want to be very thoughtful about the process, I guess, and I feel like this is very thoughtful.
Leanna?
Can I just say ditto, because I'm also all for opportunities for our students, and I like the intentionality of this. So yeah, I'm totally supportive of whatever kind of opportunities we can have for our kids. That's what we're here for. So, thanks.
Gary?
Yeah, thanks. Just to clarify, when you asked the question about do you participate in club sports, does club sport participation factor into the proportionality?
No, but it's factored into, so if we go back to, let me go back to the three-prong test. So in a way, so prong number 3 says, can the school show that despite disproportionality, it is otherwise meeting the interests and abilities of the underrepresented sex? So if there are some club sports opportunities within the community and are, for example, if the 30 freshman volleyball players at Gallatin High got cut, in this survey said it's okay, because we're very happy with our participation in club sports. Then you can take that into account, or you can use that. Prong 3, I'm sorry, fat fingers, let me get back to it. There we go. Prong 3 also allows you to, for example, you can have disproportionality if there's not a strong interest. So if you have some community surveys and we put out this survey and we don't have females asking for extra opportunities or more opportunities, and there's not a interest generated via the survey, then you're able to check that box of prong 3 that you've adequately addressed it. Because we haven't done the survey since 2018-19, we can't check that box. In 2018-19, the survey showed that both males and females wanted extra opportunities within our public schools. Everybody wants to be a Hawk and a Raptor, and we understand that and we embrace that.
We will move to public comment. Can I just see an initial show of hands of how many folks plan to speak? Keep them up just for a second so I can get a decent idea. Thanks. 1, 2. Is that only 4 people? 5 maybe? 6? All right, great. Okay, thank you, Superintendent Bertram and Mr. Rader, for that presentation. I'll ask you to vacate the hot seat.
Are you taking a break?
Oh, yeah, no. Let's pause for a 5-minute break, please. Come back at 8:07, 8:08.
I haven't been asked to be on the budget committee at Anderson.
You have or have not? Is that good, or was that a win or a loss?
I don't know, I just think it's interesting that I was asked initially and now I'm not asked. I'm not in the, I don't know. I need to not take it personally. Right?
What do they do on their budget?
I'm trying to figure out all their issues. It's a special budget committee to figure out all their issues going forward because they didn't pass the mill in. All of that. How are they gonna solve that?
I count it as a win every time I don't have to. If it makes you feel any better. I bet that would hurt. I think that would sting if I was in your
It
shoes.
did sing a little bit, but I can understand if the powers that be are discussing things behind closed doors and don't want certain things brought up.
They
within a
can't discuss things behind closed doors.
Well, of course they can. I'm just saying.
No, I know.
I'm just saying. I'm just saying that I'm not sure that they, because I have pretty strong feelings about transparency. And they know that. So I guess that's the choice it would be, right? And in all transparency, I would still support them staying around district. And yeah, right? But I think people need to know other things.
That's all I think. The conversation needs to be broad daylight.
Exactly.
That's all. If they decide they want their district, that's great. But they go, someone's good. I just think so.
Do I gavel them back in? Is that how I do it? Wait till my phone says 8:08. What's that?
How you doing?
Nice to see you in action, man.
I know, I saw that. That was awesome.
I was embarrassed watching those Merit scholars standing out
there. Yeah.
I could not stop laughing when she showed me that sign.
Yeah.
I'll be like 70. I'll see you.
Yeah. Lucky ducky. Thanks.
All right, we're gonna do this thing. First speaker is welcome to come forward. Mr. Starner, you can have 30 seconds. Everybody else gets 2 minutes.
Just press that button on the right.
Okay, there we go. Tom Starner, Bozeman resident. I've had kids at Bozeman High. I have one left still in school that does not, she is a dancer, so she doesn't participate in the school sports, but I'm just here to voice my support of baseball. I just wrote a couple of quick notes as we were talking through things. I'm now kind of unofficially a community member and no longer have a player, so I'm here as a community member now saying that I do think the community would support this. I support both schools right now, sometimes to the chagrin of my son, but I do donate to programs at both schools. So I think there's a private investment out there for the community for things. Casey kind of hit the nail on the head on the participant equity side of things, that there's some simple solutions, being girls volleyball, to help skew the football numbers, basically, that I see as the biggest issue when you try to look at that one prong. And I wanted to talk a little bit about baseball outside of school, the Legion program. It's a great program around the state, very competitive, but it's also a huge pyramid effect on kids as far as kids start out when they're freshmen and finally make the B team, and they participate in that for a year or two, and then they go to the A team, and about that time, they're kind of sophomores and juniors, and they may realize, I really think I want to be a basketball player, and that means I have to go spend summers in AAU basketball or go to football camps or whatever it might be. And the Legion program is awesome. We're all in on it. It is a commitment. It's mid-March tryouts to end of July state tournament, August state tournament. And so it does eliminate a lot of kids that have other interests, and we've seen that a lot, that kids that really enjoy it, really love baseball, but they have to make a decision really early. And what I like about high school baseball is that it's a 2-month program during school that allows those kids to still play baseball, basically. They love the game, but they have to commit one way or another to maybe further a scholarship opportunity in college. And that's a big thing to me. I know just a ton of kids that were my son's age that wanted to play but couldn't because of other things in their life. And I think those kids would have all played high school baseball for that season. So I know there's a lot of challenges to the logistics that were on the board. But my if then is it's a lot of work if it happens, but if it gets approved, the community will support it, the parents will support it, and the kids will support it. So I'm just here to say that as a community member, I'm all in on the baseball if the kids want it, and I do believe they do want it. So thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Hey, Tom, and everyone else, would you mind writing your name and I think address on that, and then maybe just pass it back to the next person who's going to speak. Thanks. Thank you. And in the interest of keeping it rolling, you're welcome to have a seat, whoever's next, and we'll keep the clipboard moving. Thank you.
Hi, thank
Welcome.
you for having this comment, and appreciate taking a look at baseball. I know changing to high school baseball is a big change for the state of Montana, so I appreciate the effort that's going into this. My name's Carson Gross. I'm here on behalf of the Bozeman Baseball Youth Program. I'm the chair, and I'm going to talk just about baseball and youth baseball in particular. Our program has grown by 20% in 2 years. So this is between the ages of about 6 and 14. And so we've had a tremendous amount of growth in baseball. We're scrambling to find fields to keep these kids playing baseball. There's a particularly large bulge in the 10 through 13 age groups. And these are kids that if we could give them the opportunity to play high school baseball, I know they would take it. We've had not just 2, but actually 3 all-star teams in the 10-year-olds and the 11-year-old age groups. So there's a lot of kids that are good baseball players, they're competitive baseball players, but that, you know, when you talk about the Legion program, they might not make that next level. They could be good baseball players. We could keep them playing baseball for longer if that opportunity is available to them. So anything we can do on the youth side, as far as Bozeman baseball goes, we're happy to do. As far as fundraising, community awareness and all that. So please reach out to us if you need that.
Thank you. Next speaker, come on up.
Hi there. I wasn't going to say anything tonight. I'll keep it very brief. Levica White, I'm a community member, and my son plays in the Bozeman baseball, has for a few years, and just loves the sport. My suggestion is to you, Casey, to maybe, if you're able to, get feedback from middle school aged kids, because they're going to be the ones coming up into it. My son's currently in 8th grade. And we'll be in high school next year. So if you can kind of give some of those younger kids a voice, I think it would be really helpful.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello, my name is Storm Norick. I am representing part of the Legion Baseball Board. I'm a member. We do believe that baseball can coexist with the Legion program, and it's a gateway from the high school to then join the Legion program and finish out the summer if the kids do choose to do that. I believe high school baseball will provide an opportunity for many of the kids who do not want to give up their summer, would gladly play baseball. And as a previous youth director of baseball said, many of these kids, they develop at different times and age groups. They give up baseball 8th grade freshman year if they don't try out and make the C or B team for the Legion Bucks. They're still growing. The kid might be throwing 85 miles an hour by the time he's a junior, but he didn't grow fast enough and he gave the sport up. I believe baseball will provide that opportunity for many of the kids who are late developers to stick with the sport and have a chance to play. As far as community and student and kid interest, I think that's not going to be an issue. This community will push and pull together to try and make this happen. As a board member, I'm asking you guys what would be asked of the Legion board to help provide this opportunity via fields and coaches and other things that are needed financially to make this sport get pushed through. So to inquire of you guys what we could do to help make that happen. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, trustees. My name's Garrett Schultz. I have a kid in the Legion program, 2 sons in the youth program. I'm on the executive committee for the youth program, and I'm the former head coach and director of our Bozeman Bucks Legion program. I'm a Legion guy for sure. I think Legion in Montana is really special. To be honest, when the state chose to pursue high school baseball, I was not in favor of that at that time. The state made that decision, and it's kind of, the first year it was what it was. This year it got better. Next year, you saw the graphic up here, there's 9 schools joining next year. By the year 2026, almost all AA schools are going to have high school baseball. So much so that our local Legion program is going to have a hard time filling out a schedule in the spring if we choose not to pursue high school baseball. So right now, today, I'm very much in favor of our school district pursuing high school baseball. I do think that it can be a positive thing for our kids in this community. I have no doubts whatsoever that our baseball community will make it happen. I think, Casey, all of your logistical implications are fair and reasonable, and I think we can meet all of those. One of my requests, I think, I would love to see this item, under 2.2, board education. I'd love to have 15 minutes for this group to present on how strong baseball is in Bozeman and how we can work together with you guys. We hear all the challenges that you're facing. with your budget, legislatively, with disproportional participation. We hear all those challenges. We'd like a seat at the table to help. You know, every piece of our baseball community is represented here tonight, really on short notice. You know, maybe the folks that read the agenda ahead of time knew more than I did, but, you know, we kind of found out on Friday and we're still able to mobilize and be here, so you can see that our community is in support of this. And we thank you for bringing it up for discussion. We think it's time, and I think 2026 would be a great time for Bozeman to do high school baseball. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Russ Smith. I'm actually a Park County resident. As you may know, the Livingston School District at the A level added baseball last year. There was tremendous community support. I worked both at the youth level as well as in the Legion level in Livingston, and I'm involved with the Legion program here in Bozeman. I'll just say quickly, you have a built-in support system with American Legion. You probably won't find an easier path than the system you have in place to make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Amy Free. I have a son who's an 8th grader, and I just want to mimic my thoughts on the survey. I don't think your seniors are going to have a good, give you a good response. I think you should be looking at some of the younger kids that'll be coming in for that 26 season, because I know there's a lot of parents out here in the crowd that are have kids in that age group. And mimicking what everybody else has said, I think 26 would be a great year to have baseball in the Bozeman school system. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Melody Welsman Thorne, and I have a son that's very passionate about baseball since he was 9. That's all he talks about. That's all he wants to do. So I really want to support his dreams, and he really wants more opportunities in our Bozeman district to play baseball. He does play for Legion, but he would love to play for high school. And he doesn't really want to have to go to Belgrade to do that. He would like to stay in Bozeman and play baseball. And he wants to go to college and play baseball and maybe beyond that. So we really want to support his dreams. My husband and I love this area, and we love all the kids, and we love this baseball community behind us. And we would just love to see that in the future for the high schools here.
Thank you.
Hello, Board of Trustees. My name is Teely Tasker. I have a freshman at Bozeman High School and a junior at Bozeman High School, 2 boys who play baseball. My older son, Cash, is just getting off a week of Arizona for his fall ball and would absolutely love to be a Hawk for his senior year, which would be 2026. There are a few other parents behind me who have the same age kids who would love to see that as well. If the Legion, if Bozeman does not, if it does not work for Bozeman to have high school baseball in that 2026 year, it will mean to those seniors who've been playing, most of them since they were small children, my son since 4, they would not really be playing a ton of baseball for the state of Montana, because the Legion program will have high school ball for all who we play for now. So Belgrade, as Garrett said, Belgrade, all the schools on there. So that is something that I am passionate about. My freshman does play football and baseball as well. And I do know that we have this amazing community behind us. We've fundraised in the last 2 years. I'm going to estimate it, $300,000 for the Bozeman Legion and the youth program. And I think that that is something to think about, that we want this and we will help you make it. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jeff Ford. I have a son as well as a sophomore at Gallatin. And I guess I'll bring up the unpopular thing. I see the number of 140 on the no-cut football thing for Gallatin, you know? And I think it's a weird sort of paradox that we would have 40, 50 kids in this thing that would be essentially all cut from playing baseball. And we have, if you ever go to the games, there's probably 40 or 50 kids that stand on the sidelines and never play. So, whereas we could swap those numbers and still have a small cut to a football program, but you could install a whole new set of seasons and things for kids to play for their school. So, just ask you guys to consider that.
Thank you. Is that it? Okay. Thank you all for coming and for commenting. We appreciate you engaging with us. Yes.
If we find that we're going to extend the survey to 8th graders, I would encourage us to include the rural schools, those 8th graders, the rural school kids in that survey. Thank you, Casey.
Any further trustee discussion? Okay.
I do.
Tanya?
This may be mute and not even something that I should be thinking about, but what impact will this have on the boys track program? And is it something that we're supposed to think about, or?
It's a really good question. I don't know what that would look like. I do know that in Title IX guidance and OCR guidance, it's always an additive model, so that they never recommend fixing disproportionality by cutting. So we should not be looking at, cutting a male sport or cutting male opportunities to bring up the female participation to add something else. So it's always keep listening to kids and then bring your community together to make that happen. So yes, there would likely be some impacts to track and field or any other sport, tennis, in that spring season.
Up next, 5.5, 2024-25 Superintendent Evaluation, Formative Discussion, Assessment Discussion number 1.
They're all leaving.
Thank you for coming.
What's that? Not listening to the superintendent evaluation?
Yeah.
Even the media is leaving.
Yeah. No, it's okay.
Okay, the item's introduced, so.
Okay, this has been a long evening. I'll make this as quick as possible, but please note that I really desire and appreciate your feedback. If you would, Mr. V, click on that item and then click on the link in the third bullet point. Yep, and scroll to page 4. And make it as big as you can. Okay, perfect. The purpose, a reminder, superintendent evaluation has 2 formative conversations and a summative conversation. My job for the first conversation is to fill out the self-assessment and to fill out the professional goals, and then any action related to those 2 professional goals, and then receive your feedback. Then, following this meeting, just a reminder of process, I start filling in evidence, and by the middle of the year, you're starting to look at evidence and fill out a rubric, and it culminates in a summative evaluation, and hopefully I'm employed next school year. Self-assessment, I have never put anything but a 3 in that. You can make it a little smaller. In the self-assessment, I am very proud of some work that we have done collectively in the last few years. And so the standard number 1 and standard number 10, I did mark as a 4. So mission, vision, and core values. We brought this community together to update the long-range strategic plan and do a major overhaul of that. I feel like we had the right people in the room, and what I'm most proud of is we are beginning to, it doesn't matter where we go or who we talk to, we're connecting the dots to our mission, vision, values, and goals. Number 10 is all about school improvement, and we've made some significant changes in how we go about doing schooling via professional learning communities and multi-tiered systems of support in our elementary, middle, and now the work being done at the high school, in my opinion, is incredible and going to reap lots of rewards down the road for our students. So you'll see some 3s and 3.5s and a few 4s. Professional learning goal, 2 of them. These shouldn't be a surprise to you because these are placeholders on the long-range strategic plan. So the first goal is effectively facilitating and overseeing the process of the staff well-being goal, and the second one's about the student well-being goal. I mentioned that on the staff well-being goal, Mike, you can scroll down to, no, we're fine. You're fine right where you're at. Goal number 1. We've gotten rid of, we've listened. HumanX was a great tool. It just wasn't measuring the right things that our school district needed. So we've severed that contract and signed a new contract with Panorama Education that's going to measure staff morale, job satisfaction, well-being, those types of conversations. It's also going to measure staff and leadership relationships within our building. We're excited about that process. Again, to date, we've signed the contract. We have agreement at the DOCC on Panorama offers endless surveys, but we've agreed on 4 of them that constitutes about 40 questions, and we've set aside a window. HR Director Strauss and I have set aside a window about 2 weeks with Panorama for that to happen, and then we'll get some great data back. The DOCC is going to end up analyzing that data, making a recommendation on the goal and the action plan associated with that. Never been more important to pay attention to how our staff are feeling within our school building. Goal number 2 is all about the student well-being goal, and we had a preliminary phased plan, and that plan is moving forward. So Trustee D sits on the student well-being committee. We had our first working, so you should really listen to her how this is actually going. We've had our first working group. We had community members. I feel like we have the right people in the room because this goal is tied to student mental health, and we know that we have kids for part of the day, and that student mental health is a community issue. And we need to engage families, we need to engage agencies across the continuum of care, and so we have Thrive in the room, who does parent education for us. We have the health director from Gallatin City County Health Department. We have the new director of psychiatry at Bozeman Health, Dr. Landon Vondell, who's fresh out of the Navy and is very cool. Very cool. And a variety of other voices. Probably the voice we listened to the most in the last group was our students. 3 female students representing Bozeman High, Gallatin High, and Bridger Charter, and then we're adding a male voice in that room For the next meeting, that group will meet 3 times, and that's all about phase 1. They have 4 goals in phase 1. We're going to look at data. We're reading the Anxious Generation book. We're going to recommend the measurable goal, associated action plans, and then any possible board action around cell phone policies, social media policies, those pieces of the puzzle. The next part of this document talks through progress to date. I just walked you through progress to date on what we're doing on those goals. We have I am helping lead the conversation, but I have, as you know, a fabulous team. And so in between those student well-being committee meetings, Mars and Mike and Chad Berg and Johanna Burtkin, we're all coming together to build the agenda for the next meeting and make sure we're connecting all the dots. We feel like we are on track on both sets of goals, and we feel like the way that the LRSP was written is by the end of 2025, we'll have a plan. We're already well ahead of having a plan. We hope by the end of the year to be bringing you any sort of board action on these goals and any sort of the actual long-range strategic plan goal and action plans associated with them. That is it. And as you know, these are just 2 of many things we're working on, but 2 areas that couldn't be more important to me is how our kids are actually doing, mental health-wise, what are the barriers to them accessing their education, and then recruitment and retention has become increasingly challenging. And, you know, Pat went to a conference that said retention is the new recruitment, that we need to keep the bodies we have despite cost of living, despite funding challenges, and responding to the staff well-being goal is important.
I will take any discussion. Leona.
I wrote this out, which I don't usually do, but I just wasn't sure how I would be feeling, so, and I'll add other things. So I'm going to read. First, I really appreciate this process to reflect on your leadership. Well, there's many things to consider and that want to be discussed. It's an opportunity for us to focus on things that matter and bring about effective change. And this is what I know about you from these past 3 years, Casey, is that you both recognize and anticipate what real change is needed, and then you act upon it. And once you set goals, you make a plan, you put concrete steps into action, you gather the right people to help you implement those, often with good humor and a lot of passion. And you don't stop there. You anticipate and look for the pieces and places where we can do better as a district and how we can do better for all kids. Everything in the last several years, from budget consensus meetings, PLCs, the LRSP, changing the master schedule, our early literacy program, even being the AA rep for the State Health Trust Committee, you spearhead and take on the responsibility and act with purpose. So we're fortunate to have your leadership. I'm relieved and heartened to hear about the goals that you chose. They show care and compassion for the people who work with our kids and for the kids themselves. They're aligned with how you rated yourself in your professional standards 5 and 6. And it's an honest recognition of how much has changed for our teachers and staff and for our kids in such a short time. So getting an authentic read on how everyone is doing and what else we can do to support teachers, staff, and students is both appropriate and refreshing. So I really just have 2 questions, one for each goal. One, I'm wondering what steps will be taken to guarantee maximum participation in that teacher survey. I'm sure there's something in there for that. And then the other question is, I know I'm sure you took great care in who made up that committee, but I'm just also curious, was there like a process for that? And I was looking for the committee list because you had rattled off some names, but I wondered if I could just get a list for that committee. And then the last thing I want to say about that book, so I drove from Anchorage, Alaska back to here to Bozeman with my oldest daughter, so she's a young adult. And we listened to most of that book on the way down. And that was one of the best, because we would stop and pause and reflect back on her childhood. It was amazing. Like, what a good recommendation. I'm so happy to hear, you know, that's what's being used as the first stepping stone. So,
thank you. Thank you for the feedback. Your first question, we know that if we carve out time dedicated time for the survey. We're going to get higher participation. So a few things we're doing. We're going to do some proactive messaging around what it is and what it isn't. And that, to be honest, the biggest part of that messaging is Human X is going away, because there was some negativity for a variety of reasons around Human X, and that the DOCC and a group of teachers in particular were made the decision. Eric Matthews is also going to help from the BEA pushing the importance of the survey. And then we're asking our principals to either find collaboration time or staff meeting time to take it. And then we've also created questions that are applicable to all. So we will have not only our school sites, but Wilson, Support Services, Bridger Charter. So all of our staff, regardless of position, will take the survey. Your second question on formative assessment, board discussion on the first, on the goal for student well-being. There's a link in there. Click.
Oh, I know I saw it.
Yeah, progress towards professional goal number 2. There's a click here link. Yeah, click that, Mike. That gives you the participant list.
Oh, okay. I totally went past that.
And then it's all the agenda is there, and all the slides and all the data and all of that is there. So we wanted the group to be small enough that they were nimble, but I was also like, part of how we're building this agenda for the future is there's going to be action items for Bozeman Public Schools, but I am hopeful that we're going to build a partnership. So there's action items for the City County Health Department, and there's action items for Bozeman Health, and there's action items for Thrive in terms of community messaging and campaigns and some of the things that are going to go with this. So I would tell you that a lot of those people wear multiple hats. Because a lot of them are parents within our district, but they're also wearing a different hat. So like Virginia Hansen is the new executive director at Thrive. She has 2 students at the high school. Dan Mills has students in multiple grade levels. Lauren is wearing multiple hats. So she's a parent and primarily trying to put on the parent hat, has a trustee hat, has a PAC leadership hat. So we're sort of underrepresented just by nature of looking at who these people are in certain areas, but when you look at their multiple hats, I feel like we got the right people in the room.
Yeah, awesome. I just want to say that I wholeheartedly support you. I'm grateful for your leadership, and we're really lucky to have you.
Thank you.
Sandy.
Well, I'm so glad I have you.
We're never separating them.
I will say I'll never forget the answer to my question last year when I said, "What do you think? What are your what's your strength? And then what is something that you need to work on?" And you said your strength. You believed one of your greatest strengths is building systems that support kids. I never forgot that. I was like, okay, over and over and over and over again, we have seen, I don't know, for lack of better words, systems or operations or committees or goals or whatever. With detail, tonight was another example of setting up all the things, thoughtful things forward to a conclusion or a solution or whatever. And so, I am very excited about your 2 goals. I think it's timely, it's necessary, and I think we will, and then to hear that we're going to spread out past the school district, because just like the reading piece, literacy, it is a community effort too. It takes a community to get kids ready to come to school and to be literate, and it takes a community to make sure our kids are well taken care of and fed and all of those things. So I am so excited about this, these goals for next year, and I am so grateful that we have you at the helm leading us through all of this very complex. And when I say you, I know I'm also including all of the people in this room and all of the people in the district that work and serve our kids, because you're very much a team a team leader. And I'm just going to offer that I hope you still play golf and take care of yourself, because that's really important. So thank you, Casey. I can't wait to get to the end of all of this next spring and see where this all goes, because it's very exciting work.
Gary?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I echo Sandy's comments as well. I think you do a really good job of planning out these kind of complex issues from kind of start to finish, on how to get it finished in a very collaborative way, which I think is critical right now, and trying to balance things out with all the other stuff you have to do, not just you, but all of our administration and teachers, but still keep things moving in a positive direction. And so I totally support this. I think it's a very good plan. The one thing I'm interested in getting is what resources do you need to really complete it that we don't have? And not that we can solve that, but I think, to me, that's a piece of this whole funding formula stuff, is really having a very good understanding of what funding we need to really provide the resources we need to have, and be able to communicate that. So just to put that in someplace.
Yeah, I think our next agenda, the working group on the student well-being side, part of the presentation is Chad and Johanna are going to do a deep dive into the continuum of care we currently have, and they're going to be very transparent around gaps. And for example, there is the legislature and the governor approved $300 million for mental health services in the state in the last session. We have heard recently that that working group thinks that every school in Montana has a fully functioning CSCT program, so why would we need any of the $300 million? And so they're going to be very transparent that we would like to have CSCT therapists in all of our buildings, but the ability to recruit and retain a CSCT therapist in Bozeman is nil. Because they can go into private practice and Medicaid reimbursement rates and like the whole thing. So yes, we will be able to provide to the working group and to trustees and to the community things that we feel like we have control over and things that we don't. I'm also very purposeful about having some of those critical organizations in the room. And they're going to have to make some decisions organizationally, whether they're coming on board with this or not. And if they're coming on board, are they coming on board with staff and resources? Are they coming on board with cheerleaders, or that piece? We're going to have honest conversations about what that means.
Just one last thing is I really appreciate and support the teamwork that you have with our administration. And I think that's a critical piece to this too. So thank you for moving that forward and developing that.
Can I say one more thing?
You can. Hit your green button.
You said something a few minutes ago that reminds me how important transparency is really important to you, and how you care about, when we talk about the achievement gap, not always talking about our strengths, because we do have incredible strengths in our district, but you are also very willing to lay out the things that we don't have, and I think that's so important to focus on. Also celebrate, but also to focus on, and that comes very naturally to you and your staff, I will say. So.
Lauren.
Thank you. I also echo everything that has been said. And going off of the systems in place, I think you do a great job as a leader, bringing people into your team, knowing their strengths, and bringing people to the table, like you said, with our student achievement or student goal. People from the community that are also putting the children in the center of the room have a similar vision to us, and just being able to make those community partners. We saw it with our SROs, keeping those community partners and remembering that it takes all of us to support our kids. They're not in our care at all times in our schools, and getting all those people on board. And that has also come, I don't want to say easily to, but that has come naturally with your ability to communicate to our public, be very transparent, and the role of communicating on social media platforms like Instagram and stuff by the staff has helped bring in more of our community. And I think bringing in all those stakeholders to see what is happening in our schools is so important. I think these goals are extremely timely. I'm excited to see where we go with them. I'm very excited to be on in that committee for the students, very inspired by the students that we heard from this first time and the conversations going there. So thank you for that, and thank you for your transparency and pulling back the curtain. And I always go back to your interview when you had the number of students written on your hand. And you said if one of those students is not being served, then we are not doing our core purpose. And that is how I describe you to people to this day. And it is very impactful. I know that we're very lucky in this district. So thank you for all you do.
Thank you.
Kevin. All right, Adam. There's been a lot said, so I appreciate all the comments. Appreciate just your leadership, Casey. Just simply, I know that's kind of been said already, but going back to you scoring yourself a 4 on the mission, and that was a big process, and we had a lot of good things that came out of it that you're reflecting and moving forward as well. So I always appreciate how you go about those processes, and I also realize, I mean, that's leadership. That's your individual leadership, but teamwork for everybody within the district. And I always appreciate how we continue even this meeting tonight regarding the baseball folks. There's a lot of different approaches. Cell phone use, we've talked about a little bit as well. There's a lot of different approaches that other districts have attempted. And I feel like from our past history and you continuing a lot of it, we continue to try to use transparency, but consensus, education of what's going on and how and the why behind things, and that just makes it adds a little bit more work, but it makes the end a lot easier. So the adage to go slow to go fast at the end, I think you continue to work on. So I appreciate everything you presented tonight and everybody's efforts that are going into continuing to push the rock up the hill. Thank you.
Melissa.
So I think this is month 9 for me. And I don't think I would have put my name in the hat in December if it wasn't for your leadership. From speaking at the Bozeman Schools Foundation, I always felt well informed about what was going on in the district. And the number one question I get asked is, how is the school board going? And I can't reinforce enough how fantastic the whole team is, from you to everybody at the Wilson. And that's one thing that has opened my eyes a lot in the past 9 months. So thank you.
Okay, that was productive conversation, and there's not much left for me to say. Bat and cleanup. Is that a phrase, batting cleanup? I know nothing about baseball.
Good timing.
The cleanup better.
Okay. I will focus my comments through what I see through my lens with your, this is nothing new, but your, what you've built here at the Wilson with your administrative team. And I've had administrators kind of say to me on the side, things are clicking on 8 cylinders, and we've, over time, had different superintendents, and there's been ups and downs, and it's never fair to kind of do any comparison, but at least through my history of being on the Bozeman School Board, If this is the building where people work in that run the rest of the district, it appears through my lens that we're in a really good place. Your team that you have, the trust that goes both directions, the relationship, and I just think the overall culture that exists here is top tier, and I do think that there's a lot of trickle down to the building administrators as well. Just having our high school principals here tonight, we're in a really good place looking at this from a 50,000-foot level from the people that we have running the school district, and buck stops with the superintendent, and so always grateful for you and having you, and great job.
Thanks.
So, Tanya.
There isn't much left to say other than thank you. You've done an exceptional job, and I couldn't help but focus on a couple things tonight. You set us up really, really well Friday that we were going to have a baseball conversation, which I'd never thought about having a baseball conversation. And we had a room here that was more supportive than I think I've ever heard any collective group of people. And I think that is years of grooming them that we listen. I am listening. And I think even from your correspondence that you shared with them on Friday through the email chains that you shared with us, that's just one example of building a rapport and a consistent presence in how you're communicating with the community, the stakeholders, parents. They trust you, Casey, and that's huge. And we reaped the benefits of that tonight, as long as I didn't destroy it with my question about track. But, I wish I could take that back. But that's just an example. And that, I think when you first started communicating, I wondered whether or not it was sustainable, because it was so deep, so in-depth, and you've sustained it, you've developed it, you've grown it, and it's fantastic. So thank you.
If there is no further discussion on the superintendent evaluation, we will move on to public comment on non-agenda items. Is there any public comment on non-agenda items? Seeing none, is there any executive cabinet reports tonight? Any Board of Trustees reports? Gary.
Yeah, just to give you an update on the meeting next week. It's coming together pretty well. So I don't know exactly how many people will be there at this point. I still have some to hear from, but it's going to be around 40, which is, it's going to be a good number. And it's a good group, diverse group. And just to let you know, if you want to just come and sit in for a bit, anybody, I'm going to have space for that where you can observe the meeting. Right now with the agenda, Janice Case from NCEE will present 10 slides on day one, I think in the afternoon. But the morning of day two, Thursday morning, starting at 8, she has 61 slides to go through on systems of education around the world and around the country and how they're structured. So that's going to take somewhere 2 to 3 hours. But you're welcome to come and just sit in as an observer if you would like. So whatever time you have. So just want to let you know. So anyway, thank you. And I want to thank Melissa for helping me. We're working together, hosting a social gathering Wednesday evening, 6:30 at the Ribbon Chop House. And I'm getting pretty good response for that, those who want to attend. So it should be good. So, and there will be a report afterwards. We'll write a report and be available to everybody, so. And I did hear back from, just to let you know, Representative Beatty. I emailed him several times, emailed quite a few legislators, texted Beatty, and he got back to me, and he's very interested to know how this comes out, which is good. And I've talked with him before, so this is just the beginning of this project. So hopefully it goes well. So maybe come and join in as you can next week. And from our board, it's gonna be Sandy and Liana on the board, trustee from Great Falls. The chair is coming. And maybe one other, and I have to hear from some other people around here about the surrounding area, Big Sky and Manhattan and stuff, about other trustees attending, so. But it's gonna be a good group, so.
Glad to hear it's coming together. Any other trustees' reports? I'm ashamed to say I have not been to my liaison school yet this year. Usually I'm there the first day, at a minimum the first week, and I haven't made it. But I pledge to make it by the next meeting, and I'll have a report. Okay, I think I get to gavel.